A very warm welcome in a cold Delhi. Today, as we have gathered here to observe the International Human Rights Day, a day which holds significance for everyone, those who are in this room, those who are outside this room, in India, globally, everywhere. And it's important that we take stock, we reiterate our commitment, we review from time to time, personally, as well as a community, as a nation, globally, as in how we are faring in terms of our own commitment to human rights. So in this context, the day holds importance because the context here is observing the day as well as commemorating the 75 years of Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the freedom of association. As we go into the program, there'll be more coming in and there'll be more interactions going forward. But without any further ado, let me welcome the eminent dignitaries for the inaugural session on the dais. May I request Mr. Arvind Francis, Executive Director, All India Organization of Employers, to kindly join us on the dais here, sir. May I request Mr. Hiranmay Pandya, who's the President of Bharatiya Mazdoor Sangh, representing the workers' organizations here. I would now like to request Mr. Satoshi Sasaki, who's the officer in charge of the ILO Decent Work Team for South Asia and Country Office for India. I would like to invite Ms. Karen Curtis, who's the Chief of Freedom of Association Branch, International Labour Standards Department, ILO, based in Geneva, headquarters. May I now request Mr. Shombi Sharp, the UN Resident Coordinator for India, to join us on the dais, sir. I have the pleasure to invite Mr. Ramesh Krishnamurthy, Additional Secretary, Ministry of Labour and Employment, Government of India. Kindly join us on the dais, sir. Before we proceed further, I would request my colleagues Namita, Akriti, and Vaishali to kindly felicitate the guests on the dais with a token, a green token of appreciation. Now that we have done a little contribution to the greening of the room today, may I now request Mr. Satoshi Sasaki, Officer in Charge, ILO Decent Work Team for South Asia and Country Office for India, to deliver the welcome remark, please. Satoshi.
Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, and my colleagues, it is my pleasure to welcome you all to this event as we observe International Human Rights Day. With the current geopolitical events, it's critical for us to recognize the value of each human life and their human rights upheld by virtue of national and international laws. It was after the Second World War, the world began to articulate universal human rights. And in 1948, for the first time, a comprehensive list of inalienable human rights was agreed upon by all nations. That December, 75 years ago, the United Nations General Assembly adopted the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Its objective was to ensure that all people could live free and equal in dignity and rights. The Declaration has become the milestone that profoundly influences international human law and has paved the way for more than 70 human rights treaties and had an enormous impact on national laws and policies. That same year, the ILO members adopted Convention 87 to protect the freedom of association and the rights to organize, safeguarding the rights of the workers and employers to choose how and by whom they are represented. So this year, we also celebrate the 75th anniversary of this important ILO Fundamental Convention. Freedom of association and collective bargaining are the fundamental rights of universal scope that should apply to all workers, therefore, also implying that the rights to exercise those freedoms. Since its inception in 1919, the ILO has promoted social justice through its international labor standards, which have sought to set forth the aspirations, values, and rights that were eventually expressed in the United Nations Charter and proclaimed in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. International labor standards have become the touchstone for law and actions by government, employers, and workers, and everyone actively engaged in human rights at work. Freedom of association and collective bargaining are enshrined in the ILO Constitution, ILO Declaration of Philadelphia of 1944, and among the ILO's fundamental principles. The rights to organize and form employers and workers organizations is the prerequisite for sound collective bargaining and social dialogue. Through the course of history, freedom of association is itself founded on the right of free speech, assembly, and organization. And through history, we have seen these collective rights throttled before and after industrialization. Without the right to associate, the prospect for achieving social justice alone. Trade unions have been threaded into India's social fabric since its freedom struggle as early as 1855, when a social reformer led a movement in Bombay for legislative measures to improve the working conditions of workers in factories. It is said to have been the genesis of India's labor movement. The formation of the Madras Labor Union in 1918 is a testament to India championing the freedom of association since even before it becomes a democracy. In its constitution, India also recognizes the protection of freedom of speech and expression to assembly peacefully and without arms, and to form association or unions. All in congruence with the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Nowhere more than in the world of work, the sphere of human activity driving social and economic progress, must human rights be protected by the rules of law, including international labor standards, if the freedom from fear and want is to be realized as the highest aspiration of for the common people. The international labor standards gives expression to human rights in the civil and political sphere, such as the rights to equality and protection from discrimination, the rights to freedom to servitude, slavery, and forced labor, and the rights to freedom of association. This year, we also thank to the ILO supervisory body, Committee on Freedom of Association, for 70 years of exceptional work dedicated to promoting and upholding respect for freedom of association worldwide, serving as the benchmark for ILO member states in their pursuit of social justice. Committee on Freedom of Association has played an important role in the development of the national legislation, impacted the resolution of the specific cases, and respond to the persistent challenges, including issues surrounding organizing the informal economy and the gender dimension of the freedom of association. The 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development built on the principle of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It envisages a world of universal respect for human rights and human dignity, the rules of law, justice, equality, and non-discrimination, of respect of the diversity, and equal opportunity, permitting the full realization of human potential and contributing to shared prosperity. Ladies and gentlemen, labor rights are part of human rights, and integrating human rights and international labor standards into the economic and legal policy frameworks is critical to reducing inequalities and creating an environment conducive to more equitable and inclusive economic development to uphold the 2030 agendas for the pledge to leave no one behind. Yet, there remains a chasm between the vision of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and 2030 Agenda and the current state of the world. We see serious challenges in terms of development and economy. While global wealth has never been greater, the benefits of economic growth and development are unevenly distributed around the world, within and among the countries. The world is still feeling the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, with several million now considered to be multi-dimensionally poor due to the crisis. Earlier this year, in the joint statement by the ILO Committee of Experts on Application of a Convention and Recommendations and the United Nations Human Rights Treaty bodies chairpersons, the representative of 9 bodies, noting these and other challenges, underscored that human rights and international labor standards provides the guardrails to navigate this crisis, and called upon all stakeholders without exception to join efforts to fully respect, defend, fulfill, and promote all human rights, and collectively strive for the future grounded in human dignity, freedom, and social justice. On 10 December 2013, the ILO Director General Jibel Ngubo called for the intensified effort to promote and protect these rights and collectively strive for the future grounded in human dignity and freedom and social justice. He said, these human rights are hard-won, and they remain essential for peace and social justice. We all have a duty to protect and support them, especially in times of conflict and insecurity. At the ILO, we pledge to redouble our efforts to promote these rights and so support the future based on human dignity, freedom, and social justice for all. So we call the same. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Satoshi. May I now request Mr. Shombi Sharp, UN Resident Coordinator for India, for his opening remarks, please.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ramesh Krishnamurthy, Additional Secretary, Ministry of Labor and Employment, Ms. Karen Curtis, joining us from ILO in Geneva, Mr. Hrinmay Pandya, President of Bharatiya Mazdoor Sangh, Mr. Arvind Francis, Executive Director of the All India Organization of Employers, my dear colleague Satoshi from ILO India, all of you in the room. It's a great honor and pleasure on behalf of the United Nations Secretary General and the broader UN country team in India to join you this morning. Aap sab se milkar bahut acha laga. It's a very important issue and an honor to be here to help mark both the 75th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, as well as the ILO Freedom of Association and Protection of Rights, the right to organize Convention 1947, and the 70th anniversary of the Committee on Freedom of Association, CFA. And pleased to see such a diverse set of stakeholders here today across government, employers, workers, organizations, academics, researchers, and the United Nations family as well. I'd like to thank the organizers, ILO and the National Law School of India University and others for helping to bring us together. Congratulate as well ILO on the volume, 70 years of the ILO Committee on the Freedom of Association, a reliable compass in any weather. I think that's a very appropriate title, given the weather that we have these days globally. Dear colleagues, on that note, we find ourselves in a world where the respect for human rights, broadly speaking, is in deep retreat. And I say that not just reflecting the many conflicts in different regions across the world, which are leading to untold human suffering and destruction. So now more than ever, we must recommit to upholding especially the opening line and the opening message of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, that all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and in rights. And this groundbreaking international commitment, as my colleague Satoshi has already mentioned, is the foundation of the concept of human rights law, legal obligations, and our global ambitions for a world of equality, fundamental freedoms, and justice for all. These ideas, as we know, permeate India's constitution, which itself reflects India's unique, essential nature as a pluralist and tolerant society, and which has given the world so many icons, so many leaders and figures to celebrate, Mahatma Gandhi, Dr. Ambedkar, among so many others. This is a history and a tradition that we continue to celebrate. And as we see India's leadership on the world stage, the recently concluded G20 presidency, just another example. And dear colleagues, as has been mentioned, work and employment specifically are integral parts of human life. Labor rights ensure that the dignity of work and workers is upheld and respected. So labor rights are therefore a core extension and pillar of human rights more broadly speaking, and obviously lead the path towards economic growth, decent economic growth, and shared prosperity. I'm very pleased in this regard to note that human rights and labor rights under the leadership of ILO and together with the many UN agencies within our country team have taken center place within our new UN Sustainable Development Cooperation Framework, which articulates our 5-year partnership offer with India, co-created with India, with governments, and with society. And ILO's Decent Work Country Program is an important engine within that broader framework to drive this partnership forward. To conclude, dear friends, let us seize the moment to recommit to preserving the gains that have been made, to stop the losses and reaffirm the universality and the relevance of human rights, the freedom of association within that, and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights more broadly. There is simply no more exciting time and place to be having this conversation than right here, right now in India, as we begin the second half of the path to 2030, as we move from the stocktake of the SDG midpoint, and we now recollect, re-aim to move forward, because India is quite simply the country that can, and we believe will deliver the SDGs quite literally at a global level. SDGs दुनिया में मुमकिन होंगी क्योंकि इंडिया में मुमकिन होंगी. For that reason, I very much appreciate all of your participation. आज की चर्चा अच्छी रहे. बहुत धन्यवाद.
Thank you, Shombi, for those inspirational words and for bringing the compass back here and reiterating that India is the engine, India is the driver if we were to achieve the SDGs. And it's right here, right now, that we need to review and take action and also preserve the gains which have been there, which have been made, and the potential which lies ahead. You mentioned about the celebratory volume which ILO has brought about in 2023, as it also marks the 70 years of the Committee on Freedom of Association. So before I invite Ms. Karen Curtis to give the introductory remarks about the book, I would request the dignitaries on the dais to unveil this celebratory volume, which Shombi mentioned about. This is the 70 years of the ILO Committee on Freedom of Association, a reliable compass in any weather. Thank you. I would now like to request Ms. Karen Curtis, who's the Chief of Freedom of Association Branch, International Labour Standards Department, ILO Geneva.
Thank you so much. And it's really a pleasure for me to be here with you to introduce you to the new volume that you will all take home and put by your bedside, I think. It's not quite yet, well, it's a little bit more than the 70th anniversary of the Committee on Freedom of Association, which was created in 1951 and began its work in 1952. So this publication is actually a year old. I'm sorry that you didn't have it before. But it's my job to present it and to present a bit the work of the Committee on Freedom of Association and how it has guided member states, countries in any weather, as was indicated previously, and the impact that it's really had relevant to human rights and the fundamental rights of freedom of association. The creation of the ILO in 1919 as the world organization, bringing together governments, capital, and labor, legitimized its role in setting the minimum level of protection for labor rights and the promotion and supervision of the guarantees of freedom of association necessary to social partnership at all levels. The creation of the Committee on Freedom of Association similarly acknowledged the strength of tripartite supervision for sending clear messages to all parties in the world of work about the respect necessary for their harmonious collaboration. As stated at its creation, freedom of association is one of the primary safeguards of peace and social justice, and has thus become the foundational fundamental principle and right at work. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights echoed the sentiments that saw the birth of the ILO, acknowledging the synergetic relationship between freedom, justice, and peace, based on universal respect for human rights and fundamental freedoms, including the freedom of peaceful assembly and of association in all spheres. The nexus between human rights and freedom of association in the ILO's mandate is seen most explicitly where non-democratic states or faltering democracies, out of fear of seeing their grip on power loosened, target most especially trade union movements and violate the basic civil liberties of their leaders. The work of the ILO, and in particular the Committee on Freedom of Association, bears witness to the critical interlinkages between freedom of association and the construction, development, and maintenance of democracies. The celebratory publication of the 70 years of the Committee on Freedom of Association marks the committee's contribution to this critical nexus. The articles on the origin and goals of the committee and on several regions, and in particular Africa, highlight this with examples throughout the last decades of the 20th century, underlining the important role played by the committee to bring about positive change in the labor sphere and beyond. During apartheid South Africa, Marius Olivier, in this celebratory publication, recalls how the ILO, first through its fact-finding and conciliation commission on freedom of association, and subsequently through the follow-up by the Committee on Freedom of Association, focused attention on the interlinkages between human rights and labor rights. In the absence of other channels for directing attention on urgent social and economic matters, ILO noted that the trade union movement inevitably fills the institutional void and plays a vital role in preserving the hope of freedom and restoration of basic rights. In South Africa, the right of trade unions to play what was characterized as a political role was defended by the ILO as the legitimate defense of the broader social and economic interests of its worker members. It was observed that the struggle for trade union rights, political emancipation, and democracy were inseparable. But indeed, it was a battle hard fought. Through decades of repression in the land of apartheid, many liberties counted as normal in a democratic society were diminished or lost altogether, including freedom of association and the right to bargain collectively. The full recognition of trade union rights could only be assured with the country's emergence into a fully fledged egalitarian democracy. Takenobu Teramoto reflects back on the East-West divide in this book. He recalls the important work of the ILO in addressing the impact of martial law in Poland in the 1980s. Here again, the trade union movement became the voice not only of the workers, but more broadly of the people. Solidarność program called for reforms in public life to lead to self-management, democracy, and the possibility of holding different social, political, and cultural views at all levels of society and in every level of decision-making. The follow-up to the ILO Commission of Inquiry several years later led to major breakthroughs, guaranteeing protection of freedom of association and basic civil liberties. In 1989, the Polish government acknowledged that the question of allowing trade union pluralism was connected with the general social, political, and economic situation of the country and direction of its future evolution. These were being carried out in an unprecedented scale for Poland and with the bold will of achieving completely new qualities in its political system. My article focuses on the significance of the ILO supervisory system with its intricate and multifaceted layers, all aimed at the fundamental objective of ensuring decent work and social justice. It addresses the similar theme of a country which ignores the value of the voice of freely chosen workers' organizations and responds with aggression on the basic civil liberties of their leaders and members. In the case of Belarus, all the ILO supervisory bodies were engaged, independent and tripartite, complaints-based, and regular application of voluntarily ratified conventions. In the end, the ILO found itself obliged to reach to its highest level of action by issuing a variety of calls to its constituents and the UN system to take whatever means available to bring about the actions necessary for the full protection of freedom of association and the respect of basic civil liberties of unionists. In their corresponding articles, Ana Virginia Morris Gomez and Kamala Sankaran, with whom we have the pleasure to hear later on, highlight historical cases addressing the impact of authoritarian regimes, martial law, and states of emergency from the Latin American and Asian regions, respectively. The cases examined by the Committee on Freedom of Association recognize that while purely political matters are outside of the ILO mandate, there is nevertheless an overlap between, as Kamala has so rightly put it, political and purely economic bread and butter unionism. As for the large percentage of the voiceless in the informal economy, they recall that the massive informal economy often exists in societies marked by high socioeconomic inequalities, which underscores the importance of providing collective voice to these workers. While recognizing the tripartite representative structure of the organization, they suggest consideration of mechanisms to facilitate recourse to the ILO for workers, often in vulnerable situations and hard to organize sectors. Indeed, in the next session, Kamala will further enlighten us in this area, and we will also hear from the Special Rapporteur on freedom of assembly and association. At its centenary 4 years ago, the ILO constituents noted that the experience of the past 100 years confirmed the need for continuous and concerted action of governments and representatives of employers and workers, that this was essential to the achievement of social justice, democracy, and the promotion of universal and lasting peace. Recognizing the need to prioritize social justice as the core of the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda, The ILO is now embarked upon the ambitious goal of developing a social justice coalition to ensure this concerted action across institutions and constituencies, and which shall, among others, accelerate progress in respect of the enabling rights of freedom of association and collective bargaining. This celebratory occasion provides us with an opportunity to consider the role we can all play in making this a reality. And I thank you very much for your participation in that. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. May I now request Shri Hiranmay Pandya ji, President Bharatiya Mazdoor Sangh, to give his address, please.
Namaskar. Thank you, Devya, on the dais, Mr. Shombi, Mr. Krishnamurti sir, Madam Karin, Mr. Shatoshi, the in-charge officer, ILO Delhi, our friend, Mr. Arvind Francis, and the gatherings of the today's in the cold Delhi. I also wish you a very warm welcome there. It's a great pleasure for me and our organization to be with us on this beautiful morning to commemorate our 7 decade celebrations of the country, and as well as the International Human Rights Day celebrations. I think this is the right time, and we are on the verge of completion of the 2023 also. So the new era will be starting just after a couple of days right now. So then we have to look for this also, not from the only point of our trade unions, also from the point of the country, and also from the point of our different employers organizations. I think it will be a very grateful thing that it was established, this convention number 87 on the freedom of association, which was taken place very well back 7 decades prior to that, almost 75 years of that. Since then, India has not yet ratified this convention 87 even also. So it's a need for the day after, maybe in the future coming year, it's a need to ratify that, to just justify our rights and everything. By saying this is one also that human rights, and we should have the approach of human-centric in all the ways also, because now we already started with the TWCP, the Decent Work Country program also, that we already signed by the 23-27 program. So that is also been signed. And way back in some 6 decades back, if you see that also, the first time in the country, in the Mumbai also itself, in the state of Maharashtra, the domestic workers have tried to unite themselves also, and they were still struggling for their decent work also. But this is the part of that even also, and then after slowly, gradually has increased the lot of that also. I wish especially that on these occasions, if you wanted to really commemorate for this day, after the 7 decades even also, let's start journey right from after a couple of days into 2024 also, with the fundamental principles of rights at work also, which is in the just 110 ILC of ILO. ILO's also plus all the tripartite constituents have passed this even also. So how to make it that more effective? But this is one instrument that in India we have started. That is what I make it. That was a 23 DWCP program. So that program will help you also on all the 3 pillars of the constitution also, because the ILO has the very 3 important 3 pillars. We are working with the sectors of government, the employers and the employees too also. And today also we can see this also, our gathering also discuss all these 3 pillars. Addition to that also, some of the prominent researchers, prominent academicians, which they are always helping us as a knowledge partners, all also helping us in moving up is this also, this research data also. So according to that even also, recently this is what has happened. And from my side, the organization and also individually, I'm really thankful to have this kind of the ebook launching today. The Madam Corinne and the team has taken a lot of pain for gathering some data, making some research work, and just putting it for all of us to start with or thinking with also. So that they are, because it is a cold weather or whatever it is, but I have written there's a compass says you, taking you the right direction of the weather. That is this. So today it will be a very grateful for all of us. I think this is a very succinct remarks, and that is what the need of the day. I am also feeling delighted to be have the sharing in the present opening remarks with all of you also, being the part of this today's ebook launching everyone also. And this is what in future going to also help us, not only to the organization only, but the total workforce of the country, and as well as the total the united people or the different parts of the Turkey, which has been already mentioned that the after even the COVID-19 also, the lots of impact has been we have faced, still we have to face, and still we have to go further, we have to do further more work. I think especially lots of the other areas are simultaneously working on that also, not only with this also, but the other conventions are also required to work with also, and UN SDG program also we are working, so the part of that even also. So I think the today's celebrations program will definitely help us, will be the little about some more points we will come out with this also. And I also, and the President Marks also wish you the very coming of the all good wishes for our this today's consultation and the workshop. And with this, I would like to stop here with this also. Thank you for patient hearing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pandyaji. May I now request Mr. Arvind Francis, Executive Director, All India Organization of Employers, to deliver the address, please.
A very good morning to all of you, all the eminent speakers on the dais, ladies and gentlemen. I must thank ILO for giving me this opportunity to come here amongst you and to speak here on behalf of the employers. When the Universal Declaration of Human Rights was heralded at its adoption in 1948, its objective was to ensure that all people could live free and be equal in dignity and rights. In the last few decades, global wealth has become greater than ever before, but it is not distributed equally around the world or within and among the countries. This gives raises to conflicts and crises. Developing a human rights economy demands action at both the national and global levels, both within countries and from the broader international community. Meaningful participation by those affected and their communities and private sector engagement aligned with human rights will be essential for moving towards a human rights economy, as well as reform of all the international economic architecture to make it more representative, equitable, and human rights oriented. The structural and technological changes pose unprecedented challenges to today's industries and the traditional methods of representation and negotiation for both workers and employers. The main part of the Indian workforce is non-organized, which leaves people outside of the scope of social dialogues, and freedom of association needs to be extended in practice effectively to this great part of Indian society. Freedom of association is proclaimed in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It's essential for functioning of any free labor market at its ensure that employers and workers have a voice and are represented in the appropriate forums to advocate for their best interest. Choosing one's own organization for association is fundamental for an open and democratic society, as that is how one exercises their free speech. The importance of human rights in the world is highlighted given that the business and human rights is now a thematic under the United Nations and also in boardrooms, which are working to ensure that human rights are seen more than just corporate social responsibility considerations and as integral to business continuity and sustainability. In practice, this looks like ensuring respect of human rights throughout the supply chains and also developing guides and toolkits to support businesses in managing human rights risk. Businesses have faced uncertainties in this rapidly changing global market. Establishing genuine dialogue with freely chosen workers' representative enables both workers and employers to understand each other's problem better and find ways to resolve them. Security of representation is foundation for building trust on both sides. At AIOE, we all are committed to encourage social dialogue, and we have been working very closely with ILO in this front. We conducted a study during the COVID times, and we found out that there were three basic things which came up. One was encouraging social dialogue. The second one was building trust, and third was on the reskilling and reintegration, basically, when the migrants had gone and they were supposed to come back. So basis that we took a project also wherein we are working in three states, Kerala, Gujarat and Rajasthan, where we are trying to build this coalition of social dialogues, bringing in all the stakeholders in the states, whether it's the labor machinery in the state or the employers or the trade unions. And we have not limited only to the tripartite, we have extended it beyond that, and we have encouraged the civil societies, the NGOs to join this coalition. We had the first consultations in all these three states, and the main purpose was basically for the migrants, and not only migrants, even the underprivileged, to come up and discuss the issues, challenges, so that whatever rights they are deprived of, what this coalition can do to take care of those rights. There's also one example which I can cite. What we are doing is in the state of Gujarat, whereas we have formed a FICCI SOCO compact, and this SOCO compact has again brought in different stakeholders from civil societies, NGOs, employers and all. And we are working on the 6 key outcomes so that all the workers who are there, they get their rights. The first outcome is on securing living wages. The second is to foster gender equality. Third is to ensure health and social security. Fourth is to maximize safety against accidents. Fifth is to facilitate and access to entitlements. For this, we have opened up many facilitation centers, enable participation in future of work. So these are the 6 outcomes which this coalition is working in the state of Gujarat, and now we have moved to the state of Maharashtra. And the coalition that we have formed in the 3 states, we are trying to bring it up to the SOCO compact level. So the idea is that AI is committed. We are also in discussion with like-minded employers who can come in, and we can adopt clusters, so that in these clusters, we can create that ecosystem where the rights of the workers are taken care of by these interested employers. So I'll stop here, and but I would say that it's not only that the government can do or the employers can do. We all concerned stakeholders have to join hands, and if we want a better India, if we want a better living conditions for all, we need to come together, join hands, and see that everyone gets their rights in India. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Francis. As you highlighted that when we talk about human rights, when we talk about labor rights, we all have a role to play. And the participants in this room are from, of course, the ILO constituents. When we talk about ILO constituents, we're mentioning the employers, the workers' organizations, their representatives are here. We have colleagues from the academia, researchers, we have UN organizations, sister agencies represented here. We have colleagues from ILO, Ministry of Labor, of course, is here. But then in the spirit of the discussions today, which will follow, and the day which we are marking, we heard the speakers reiterate that, yes, human labor rights are human rights, and we all have a role to play. No single agency, no single individual can take the onus or the responsibility or can claim that I'm the one who's the duty bearer for ensuring that rights are ensured for everyone. So on that note, I would like to request Mr. Ramesh Krishnamurthy, Additional Secretary, Ministry of Labour and Employment, Government of India, to deliver the keynote address, sir.
Thank you, Divya. Good morning to you all. Mr. Sasaki Satoshi from ILO, Mr. Shombi Sharp, UN Resident Coordinator, Ms. Karen Curtis, Chief Freedom of Association Branch in ILO, Mr. Hiranmaya Pandya, President of the Bharatiya Mazdoor Sangh, Shri Arvind Francis from the All India Organization of Employers, colleagues and friends and ladies and gentlemen from all ILO constituents and from academia and researchers. A very warm welcome and good morning to you all. I thank ILO for giving me the opportunity to be here and to share some of my views and comments on this very historic occasion. We are in the 75th year of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and very importantly, the freedom of association. All the speakers before me have already given you all a background, how important it is for the key, I would say, principle of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which is all humans are born free and equal in dignity and rights, is the first article of the UDHR. Even our Constitution in its preamble highlights justice, liberty, equality, and fraternity as the key ideals on which the Constitution is based. The Constitution, of course, recognizes each individual as free and equal with the same right to living with dignity. However, we are in the cusp of transformative changes, both geopolitically and socially, as well as economically, which makes the Universal Declaration of Human Rights an essential instrument in advocating for peace and social justice. India has contributed quite significantly to the content of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And I would draw reference to our own trade union movement, our social struggles associated with the freedom movement, right from the previous, from the 20th century, and as well as earlier. And we have seen that the trade union movement and the strive for democracy, strive for independence have existed in the Indian conscious for a very long time now. And I think that has played a significant role in India being one of the founding members of ILO and being participative in almost all discussions that have happened, especially to the development of the UDHR. At various stages of the drafting between 1946 and 1948, the representatives of India were actively included in the drafting process. The theme of today's event, which is, I think, the focus on the freedom of association, I think is an indispensable element when we speak about human rights. Freedom of association is closely related to the right of freedom of speech and expression and the right of every person to participate in public discourse and public social dialogue. As already mentioned, our movements such as Swarajya or self-rule and independence, Swadeshi, and the Quit India movement are all examples of coming together of the masses our freedom to associate under the umbrella of nationalism to achieve the common goal of independence. India has always focused on the ideal of shared prosperity, which requires permitting the full realization of human potential, for which equality and dignity of life are fundamental. Now, I'm also grateful to Ms. Curtis for bringing out, some details of the symbiotic relationship between democracy and the trade union movement and the freedom of association, because she gave the example of Poland, and we all cannot forget Lech Walesa, who led the trade union movement, and how that broadened into a change in the political structure of Poland. I would also like to point out that as far as the Universal Declaration of Human Rights are concerned, in 1966, I think the UN General Assembly also adopted 2 international treaties to shape human rights, which is the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, and the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. Together, these are known as the International Covenants, is the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and the 2 covenants are broadly known as the International Bill of Human Rights. And India is a signatory to both these covenants. And both these covenants set out the civil, political, economic, social, and cultural rights that everyone is entitled to. There are a total of 18 international human rights treaties, of which India has ratified 8 instruments. And in India, I think, as I already said, there is a very deep and symbiotic relationship between democracy and human rights. And so we hold all the principle of human rights very dear to our heart. Human rights in India hold a very immense significance in a diverse and democratic society, and it reflects the core values enshrined in the Constitution of India. India has made significant strides in upholding fundamental human rights and principles, such as the right to equality, freedom of speech, religious liberty, and several others. The National Human Rights Commission of India was established in 1993 under the Protection of Human Rights Act. And the National Human Rights Commission carries out awareness campaigns, capacity building programs, research initiatives, and serves as I would say, as the consciousness of, Indian society and its commitment towards human rights. In Section 2(1)(b) of the Protection of Human Rights Act, 1993, human rights is defined as the rights relating to life, liberty, equality, and dignity of the individual, guaranteed by the Constitution or embodied in the international covenants and enforceable by courts in India. The country, of course, as all our speakers have highlighted, is grappling with various challenges, and every challenge, of course, is an opportunity. We heard about the impact of COVID-19, and we all have seen how migrant labor was one of the first that was impacted severely by the pandemic. We are today grappling with challenges relating to gender equality, access to education and healthcare, and various forms of discrimination in any society. It is our endeavor that these are challenges that we must meet head on and fight. India also has a very robust judiciary, and I think we have been very proactive. The judiciary has been very active in protection of human rights. Civil society organizations also play a very important role. Social media is exploding. So I think any event today in the world, and not only restricted to India, any event that impacts human rights are rightfully the grain viral prominence, and they keep questioning our commitment again and again to human rights. I think they really serve um, as the Davies lamp, I would say, in the mining parlance, to any violation of human rights. I think it is one of the most important developments today that social media is playing a huge role. As far as work and employment, the legislative and constitutional provisions that are existing in India today, the bonded labor system was abolished. The constitutional provisions have provides for protection of children from involvement in economic activities. And Article 21A guarantees the right to education. Article 24 enshrines the right prohibition of employment of children in factories. Article 39 talks about securing the health and strength of workers, men and women, and that the children rights are protected. And the legislative provisions relating to child and adolescent labor has also been promulgated in 1986, and as amended in 2016, provides protection to children below 14 years of age and from any kind of employment, and prohibition on employment on adolescents from 14 to 18 in hazardous occupations or processes. The Human Rights Convention on the Rights of the Child has been ratified by India. India has also ratified two ILO fundamental conventions on child labor, C-182, Worst Forms of Child Labor Convention 1999, and C-138, Minimum Age Convention 1973. As far as India is concerned, most of you would be aware that 4 codes on, as far as labor codes were concerned, 4 labor codes were enacted, amalgamating close to 29 central labor laws. These are the Code on Wages 2019, Industrial Relations Code 2020, Social Security Code 2020, Occupational Safety, Health and Working Conditions Code 2020. These are now in process, where the state governments and union territories are in the process of drafting the rules under these codes and opening up for public consultation. Most of the states have done that. A few states do remain, and that is where we are. As far as the Code on Wages 2019 is concerned, the most important thing it talks about is the equal pay for equal work, non-discrimination of grounds of gender in matters relating to employment, statutory right for minimum wages and timely payment of wages, and the statutory concept of a floor wage was introduced. As far as the right to social security is concerned, the Code on Social Security covers the coverage of 10 or more employees under the Employee State Insurance Corporation. And the ESIC, I'm glad to inform, is really expanding its footprint. There are close to 161 hospitals and over 1,000 dispensaries spread all over the country, and in association with the states, that expansion is going on. Today, ESIC is present in 616 districts of the country, and it is envisaged to cover almost every district in the country. The coverage of, I would say, universal health already exists through our primary healthcare centers and our tertiary centers, but ESIC plays a very important role in providing that medical insurance to the formal sector. And under the Code on Social Security, I'm glad to inform that coverage of informal sector employees has also been visualized. So that is also a very significant change as far as the Code on Social Security is concerned. Apart from that, the Employees Provident Fund organization is one of the largest social security organizations, and at present it has over 270 member accounts. It settles almost about 41 million claims every year and provides retirement benefits to the formal sector employees. As far as the informal sector is concerned, and arising out of the COVID pandemic, we had in the Ministry of Labor set up the eShram portal, and this is probably one of the world's largest databases of unorganized workers. Today, over 29 crore workers are enrolled in this database, which is over 290 million. And we are now realizing, and mind you, that each one of these registrations are Aadhaar backed and Aadhaar verified. So it's a very robust and reliable database. There are very two key modules in this eShram database. One is relating to the building and construction workers, and the second is migrant workers. So this is self-reported, and we hope that we will be slowly incentivizing more and more workers to voluntarily register their present status, their present address, their present occupation. And this database is really proving to be a very valuable database for policymakers. Glad to share with you that even the PM Vishwakarma scheme, which was recently launched by the Prime Minister, talked about 18 artisanal occupations like the pottery makers and things like that. About 18 lakh informal sector workers registered in eShram. This database was shared with the ministry, and this formed, I would say, the initial set of data points which was used for targeted campaigning of such people with the potential of being covered under the PM Vishwakarma scheme. So like that, I mean, one of the initiatives that we have also undertaken in collaboration with the states is to identify out of this 29 crore, 290 million people, who are all the unorganized workers or the informal workers who are not covered by social security benefits, not covered by ration card, not covered by some of the schemes that they are eligible to, and highlighting that these are the potential, I would say, targeted beneficiaries who could be covered under various schemes. So this database is available with us, and we are trying to make sure that we can make a maximum use. And everyone would agree, and as was pointed out by one of our fellow panelists here, that while the formal sector constitutes probably only 15 to 20% of the total workforce participation, the informal sector is roughly around 80 to 85%, and we have to reach out to them. And the way to reach out to them is first to understand who they are and identify who they are, and that is something that the eShram portal has successfully managed to do. As far as the human right relating to right to work and freedom to choose and accept work, I am also glad to inform you that the National Career Service Portal, which the Ministry of Labor runs, is one of the, I would say, the primary government free employment service portal. Today, over about 36 million job seekers are registered, covers to over 1.8 million employers are registered on this portal. At any given point of time, roughly, we have about over 1 million vacancies advertised on the National Career Service Portal. So this has again become, I would say, one of the one of the initiatives with the maximum potential for us to reach out to all our job seekers. We heard from everyone that labor rights begins with probably the right to work, and also labor rights are probably the starting point for human rights, and right to work obviously is probably one of the most important activities. We also heard from some of the participants here that the platform economy is growing, and in India it is forecast to become one of the very significant contributors to employment and work for the potential job seekers, and together with increasing female participation in the labor force and issues surrounding the platform workers, I think these are two key areas that the government is very keen working very closely with not only in the tripartite format of talking to all the I would say platforms, employers, the representatives of employees and workers, and the association of platform workers, along with various civil society organizations. So I think these are very important aspects that the Ministry of Labor is working on. I would like to also highlight the Maternity Benefit Act, which was amended in 2017, and I think the way forward for us is the awareness towards safeguarding and promoting human rights among the society, business and industry, including the micro, small and medium enterprises, very key, very important. Businesses and industry need to comply with the legal provisions relating to labor and employment and aim to go beyond compliance for the well-being of their workers and society. As Mr. Sharp has already highlighted, that I think SDGs, our target of meeting SDGs, India is committed to that, and India would be one of the most important, I would say, significant contributors to that. As I mentioned, inclusion of the informal economy. I think Mr. Pandya referred to domestic workers in Maharashtra starting to organize. I think these are all movements that will slowly and surely bring to focus more and more about human rights, not only in India, but everywhere in the world. I thank everyone here for giving me a patient hearing, and I wish you all the best for the discussions that are to happen. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for highlighting what each of the constituencies represented here has brought together this morning and shared in terms of what they are doing or doing their bit for preserving the human rights, preserving the democracy, preserving the inalienability of both democracy, human rights, and the freedom of association. So thank you for that. I certainly will not venture to attempt any kind of summary from what the panelists have said this morning. In the history of mankind, 75 years may look like a baby step, but the complexity which we have, the challenges which we face, not only in these days, but ever since we realized that there's a need for working on the issue of human rights. And in 1948, when it was a concerted effort and all the states, nations, they came together, member states came together to commit themselves to a task which may look like a small one, but which binds everyone to play a role. So the 75 years may look like a baby step, but the achievements which have been there have been both a mixed bag. Not on the negative side all the time, but on the positive side as well. So as I had said a while back, that for the purpose of the audience here, and the reference which was made to the Decent Work Country program, the constituents of the ILO. So we are trying to also see if we were to walk the talk on human rights, and we were also to look at how, as the constituencies in the world of work, we can do something using the tenets of freedom of association and right to collective bargaining. I think the day today is going to reflect on some key actionable points which we may want to dwell upon in the next two sessions, which are going to be very soon coming our way. So on that note, I would like to just thank all the eminent dignitaries on the dais who have highlighted and gave us a lot of food for thought in terms of how we view the 75 years, how we reflect back, and what are the actionables in terms of our contribution, whether it's to working towards the SDGs, whether it's looking at what the government is working on, the kind of the programs, the schemes which are there on board. Do we have a role to play in ensuring that these entitlements reach those who are in need? Are we Are we in a position to do something ourselves, or we can mobilize more support to do that? We heard from Mr. Francis, Mr. Pandya about what the employers and workers think and do in their constituencies for ensuring freedom of association and human rights, while it may not have been in the shape and form which we are used to hearing when we talk about human rights. But there's a direct correlation to the work which is happening and the role which we can play. I think we are a bit behind schedule, and without making any further remarks here, I thank one and all for your time today, and I would request if you can still spare time for the rest of the discussions, please be with us. And otherwise, we are breaking for tea for 15 minutes, and with the request for everyone to regroup at 11:15. So the tea is served here on my left, and please have tea and then join us for the panel, which will be led by Dr. Kamala Shankaran. And you have it on your agenda. And then the second panel will be led by Ms. Amarjeet Kaur, the General Secretary of AITUC. So thank you for your time today. And let's break for tea now. Thank you. I would like to request you to bring your tea and coffee to your respective tables to save our time, and we start on time. Thank you very much. Now that I have your attention, we can now proceed, with your permission, to the panel on discussing the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and significance of freedom of association. So for this panel, I would like to request Dr. Kamala Shankaran, Professor, National Law School of India, University, Bangalore, member of the Committee of Experts on the Application of Conventions and Recommendation, to kindly facilitate the session. And if you can join us here, ma'am. I would like to request Ms. Karen Curtis, Chief Freedom of Association Branch, International Labour Standards Department, ILO, Geneva, to kindly join us here. Mr. Mayank Dias, Assistant Secretary, Employers Association, Delhi, All India Organization of Employers. Mr. Sudarshan Rao Sarde, Organizing Secretary, Hind Mazdoor Sabha, Telangana. If you can join us here, sir. Now I would, yes, please, sir. I think so.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah. I would now like to hand over the session to Dr. Kamala Shankaran to take it forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning and greetings to everybody here. My thanks to the ILO for organizing this such an important function to mark 75 years of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and also the adoption of ILO Convention 87 on freedom of association and protection of the right to organize. So in our opening session, we heard several speakers explain the importance of human rights, labor rights as human rights, and why this is so important for us in India And I think it's very important. Our constitution, we recognize the right to association in India. We also see that these rights are part and parcel of the way in which civil liberties are available in our country, because without a broad bedrock of human rights, civil liberties, democratic rights, the particular freedom of association is very difficult for us to enjoy. I just wanted to share one little commonality, which I think which will be of interest. So the delegation from India that went to the United Nations to form the United Nations, as it were, Mr. A. Ramaswamy Mudaliar led the Indian delegation in 1944 to 46 period and was instrumental in creating the UN Charter, in adopting the statutes of the International Court of Justice. And he went on to then become a member of the Committee of Experts of the applications of conventions and recommendations, and then went on to become a chairperson. So the close link between the UN human rights and the Committee on Freedom of Association, as well as the ILO committee supervisory bodies, is there very well. Now, when we look at freedom of association, we know that this is not one single right. It's in fact a bundle of rights. There is the freedom to join a trade union, the freedom to join an association. And what's interesting is that Convention 87 says this right is available to every worker without distinction, any distinction whatsoever. And that means that it's not just workers in the formal sector, but a large array of workers in the informal economy who also have the right to form unions. And we know that in the next session, we are going to be looking at organizing efforts by workers in the informal economy also. Now, when we have this particular right, they have a right to form unions. Very often, many of them are forming other forms of organizations like cooperatives, they're forming self-help groups, but under Convention 87, all of that would be covered, and we need to see what is the best form, and the most political and the most advanced form is, of course, to form a trade union. And the trade union, the act in India, I think is very useful. It allows any group of workers to form a trade union. I say this because if you look at several other countries, it's only employees who are allowed to form a trade union. And in India, the workers, self-employed, so Seva, for instance, self-employed without a designated employer, is also having the right to form a trade union. Apart from forming the trade union, the freedom of association, both in UDHR as well as in Convention 87, is allowing requires that the union should be formed without prior authorization, and having been formed should have the freedom to function. And that's another very important right which falls within the bundle of right of freedom of association, which is that you have the freedom to function. What you do with your budget, very importantly, whom you elect as your leader, your freedom to function, those are very important. But I think most importantly, your freedom to speak on behalf of your members, which means that you have the freedom to collectively bargain if it's an employment relationship with the employer at the industry level, at the enterprise level. And if you are self-employed, if you are a waste picker, if you are a street vendor, if you are a self-employed embroiderer working at home, then you have the right of social dialoguing with the eventual enterprise which is benefiting from your work, with the government, etc. The point I want to make is that we are today celebrating Convention 87, and it's 75 years. Next year will be 75 years of collective bargaining. And I think over these 75 years, the ILO has broadened collective bargaining to also deal with social dialoguing. We heard our additional secretary, Mr. Krishnamurthy, speak on that, and that social dialoguing is also a part. Just moving on to a couple of more points that I want to speak before I open it up. India has ratified Convention 11 and Convention 141, which are specific to rural workers. And this is very significant. These rural workers are not in employment. Many of them are small and marginal farmers, and they form, and if today we look at the verification data, from 2002 and whatever has happened since 2002, we find the greatest growth of trade unions are in rural workers and agricultural employees. This is a rapidly, the density, is rapidly increasing. I think this is very important because we are also celebrating the 70th anniversary of the Committee of Freedom of Association. Now, the CFA and India have also had a very special relationship. India has not ratified Convention 87 and 98 yet. One of the largest number of complaints that are before the Committee on Freedom of Association has come from India. How is this as a paradox? Because notwithstanding the fact that we have not ratified 87 and 98, the freedom of association is one of those foundational principles which every country which is a member of the ILO has to respect. And we see its reflection in the ILO Constitution of 1919 when India was a founding member. We see it in the Declaration of Philadelphia of 44 that freedom of association is a fundamental principle. We see it in the large number of complaints that go from India to the CFA. We see it in the Declaration of Fundamental Principles and Right to Work of 1998, which again and India has voted for all of these. India was voted positively in the adoption of the fundamental principles. India has voted when the governing body set up the CFA. India has been, so I consider this as a very important point of congruence between India and the ILO. And happily, as my concluding last 2 points, because I know we're running short of time, I don't want to take more time, is that the Committee on Freedom of Association, in its most recent case from India, has recognized that freedom of association complaints need not come only from employed workers, but it can come from workers who are not in an employment relationship. I find this very significant. Gig and platform workers are not strictly in an employment relationship, but any obstruction in their right to organize could be a subject matter over which ILO can look. Likewise, in agriculture, there are a large number of employees or workers, I should say, not employees. And in the informal economy, we know that there are many types of workers who work. There are workers without protection, but who work in the formal sector. The unorganized workers in the formal sector. Those are people who also have the right to organize. We know oftentimes that the trade unions has extended to people who are in formal jobs, and contract employees in public sector undertakings are not necessarily organized in trade unions, but they have the right. It also extends to the informal sector. All people whom I mentioned earlier, like street vendors, platform workers, waste pickers, etc., home waste workers, are all people. And I think in the next session, we will be hearing more about this. Lastly, I'd like to just flag one more point, that social justice, which is currently a important thrust area of the ILO, is something that resonates deeply with us in India. Our entire constitution is founded on the principle of social justice, that there is no either or. If giving rights to people is not antithetical to development, we have freedom and development. And India and its constitutional scheme is premised on the principle that we walk both with rights and with development simultaneously. And therefore, any future development of India definitely is to be and has to be based on labor rights and human rights. We have a wonderful panel with us this morning. And we have, I'm going to request, we have persons present here, but using technology, we are going to have also in front of us Mr. Clement Vole, who is the UN Special Rapporteur on the rights to freedom of peaceful assembly and association. And we will now first hear his video message before we move on to the other panelists who are present here physically this morning. So welcome. Good morning, Mr. Vole. We are delighted that you're able to join us. And I now request that we hear his message. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon, good morning. Let me thank first ILO for the invitation to address this important event. 75 years ago, the world underwent a transformative moment with the adoption of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. By recognizing each and every person equality and dignity, and recognizing the inherent link between the right to peaceful assembly and the protection of all human rights, the drafter of the declaration envisaged a world of peace, cohesion, democracy, and human rights. Article 20 of the declaration recognizes the right of every individual to peacefully associate and assemble. As such, following its adoption, the declaration spurred on global liberation movements like the civil rights movement, the anti-apartheid movement, and more recently, Black Lives Matter and Me Too. The same year, the ILO Convention number 87 on freedom of association and protection of the right to organize was adopted, serving as the cornerstone of ILO Labor Convention. The subsequent creation of the ILO Committee on Freedom of Association 5 years later reinforced the commitment to promoting freedom of association and establishing a benchmark for social justice and universal peace. Today's event is an opportunity to recall the continued relevance of both instruments and that of the Committee of Freedom of Association, and to emphasize the critical role of the right to peaceful assembly and association in upholding the rights enshrined in the UDHR for all, including for all workers. In light of today's compounding and interconnected global crisis, freedom of association and assembly rights are more important than ever, as they constitute the channel through which all can raise their concern, come together, and hold to account those who are responsible for human rights violations. Freedom of association and assembly rights are also the starting point for the exercise of all labor rights. When workers can form union, engage in collective bargaining, and strike, it levels the often unequal relation between the workers and employers, and let them prevent or correct work abuses, negotiate fair wage, and demand better working conditions. Over the years, my predecessors and I have constantly shed light on the challenge faced by workers in exercising their rights, particularly workers in the informal economy. Our research reveals a concerning reality. Workers' rights to freedom of peaceful assembly and association are far from being adequately respected, protected, or fulfilled globally. Among other reasons, the rise of the new global economy order has concentrated power in multinational corporations and exacerbated wealth inequality. This has first eroded state ability and sometimes their willingness to effectively regulate businesses. Second, this has had a profound impact on workers' ability to exercise their right to peaceful assembly and association. And thirdly, this has weakened the traditional tool of labor rights, such as trade union and collective bargaining. In my 2022 report on freedom of association and assembly rights of informal economy workers, I argue that restriction on the freedom of assembly and association in the context of work, coupled with the expansion of the informal sector, has further exacerbated the situation. The situation is made even worse by the COVID-19 pandemic and the underlying worsening of global inequality and exploitation, and the increased challenge posed by the climate change, environmental degradation, and the ongoing conflicts we are seeing around the world. The statistics on the state of workers' freedom of peaceful assembly and association are alarming. According to I2C 2022 Global Index report, 87% of the country violated the right to strike, and 74% of countries excluded workers from the right to establish and join a trade union. Workers in the informal economy face even greater hurdle, characterized by poor condition, low wage, and a lack of protection against various abuses. They often lack access to justice and struggle to assembly, form a union, or negotiate for the better condition, rendering them powerless to influence positive change. This, in turn, is exacerbating broader problems such as global inequality, poverty, violence, child and forced labor, human trafficking, and slavery. Today, while we are celebrating the 75 years of Universal Declaration of Human Rights, we are reminded that in many countries around the world, migrants do not enjoy their rights to association and assembly, and migrant workers can hardly form trade union or join one. As we grapple with these challenges, it is imperative to issue a call for action. I reiterate the call of the Director General of the ILO from 1991, recognizing that it is only through forming and joining organizations of their own choosing that workers in the informal sector will be able to generate sufficient pressure to bring about the necessary change in policy, attitudes, and procedure that hamper the development of their sector and the improvements of working conditions in it. Addressing this critical situation requires the removal of restrictions on freedom of association and the creation of a new institution designed to amplify workers' voices. This involves recognizing the diversity of characteristics and need of workers in the informal sector, as noted in the ILO Recommendation 204. While it is heartening to see there has been increased recognition by UN body and mechanism that violation of workers' rights, including the rights of formal and informal workers to associate and assembly, constitute a human rights violation, the current situation remains deeply troubling. As we celebrate the Universal Declaration of Human Rights this year, my foremost recommendation is for the UN to intensify its efforts in ensuring unequivocal respect for workers' rights to freedom of peaceful assembly and association. An important step in the right direction will be to ensure coherency across the various conventions and instruments on the right to peaceful assembly and of association within UN mechanisms to help eliminate any ambiguity and to facilitate implementation in national level or in national law. Moreover, freedom of assembly and association is critical to a new social contract that lays the foundation for a human rights economy. A human rights economy grounded in the rights of every individual will contribute towards achieving the Sustainable Development Agenda and hence address social and environmental issues, promote inclusive participation, and invest in human rights, social protection, universal education, healthcare, and a decent standard of living for all. Let us commit ourselves to championing the right to freedom of peaceful assembly and association for workers globally. Only by doing so can we forge a pathway towards a more just, inclusive, and secure world for all. I wish you a very, very successful celebration and very, very successful event, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Vole. I think he highlighted that there could be no freedom of association without an overall environment of democratic rights, democracy, and the right to organize and to assemble. And so the link between human rights and freedom of association is so important. And I think when you look back 75 years ago, there was the synergy between the two, that they both got adopted at the same time, of course, through two different bodies, but the synergy is there. I now invite Ms. Karen Curtis, Chief Freedom of Association Branch of the International Labour Standards Department at the ILO, to then share her views with us. Thank you. You're free, Ms. Curtis, either to speak here or there, as you wish.
Okay. Thank you. Well, I think it's a panel, so I'll be very happy to speak from here. I want to focus a bit on how internationally we collaborate in promoting these human rights and the fundamental right of freedom of association. I really leave it to you, the audience, who know much better how this is done in India and are going to share this with us, and the role of the tripartite constituents and even beyond the tripartite constituents in really promoting human rights and freedom of association. And as has been mentioned by many, even without the ratification of the fundamental conventions on freedom of association and collective bargaining, we all hope that India, as the largest democracy and with really no reason not to ratify these conventions, will be able to do so in the near future. But we do note that India has ratified, as was already mentioned by Kamala, the very important conventions concerning the agricultural workers and the rural workers. The Rural Workers Organization Convention is, in some respects, even more important than the Freedom of Association Convention, in the manner in which this really requires the government to be promoting the capacity of rural workers, many of whom we know are informal, to be promoting their capacity to organize, to come together, and to have a collective voice not only concerning directly their terms and conditions of employment, or even not of employment if they're in formal economy, but also their voice, their collective voice with the government in terms of decisions about the rural economy, rural infrastructure, decisions that really impact and affect them. And the importance of this convention to really bring about that there is social dialogue with this very important part of the working community. So as I said, I go to focus a little bit on the international collaboration and the concerted messages that we are giving from the United Nations system and from the ILO, and the tools that we are also bringing for you to use to really promote the respect for human rights and labor rights in country situations. these two really important instruments, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the ILO Convention on Freedom of Association, they set out some very important points, and one of which is that the rule of law is essential for the respect of these rights. And this is something I think we really need to focus on in the current context. They ensure a level playing field across all continents, and the recognition that the violation of these rights really endangers peace everywhere. So it is really a commitment that has to be taken by all states, and somehow we need to be able to ensure really that it is guaranteed. The ILO, which has already been mentioned, has renewed its synergies with the United Nations system. We had heard also about the statement, the joint statement from the ILO Committee of Experts, and the treaty bodies about the importance of human rights and labor rights as human rights for ensuring the common values of universal peace, freedom, equal rights, social justice, human dignity. We see that the current multifaceted challenges that the world is facing really bring the importance of these rights out now more than ever. We've heard about the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, the economic globalization, violence and insecurity, climate change, technological transformation, demographic shifts, and geostrategic tensions, which we see now more than ever. And these all come together and are really threatening the achievement of the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals that is really just around the corner when we really think about it. They have accentuated inequalities, undermined the exercise of fundamental rights, and led to a further shrinking of civic space, which really is a call to all of us to be paying particular attention to these areas. We've heard a lot about the importance of freedom of association for democracy. And of course, we know that without the respect for basic civil liberties, we cannot have freedom of association. And for this reason, already in 1970, the ILO adopted a resolution which warned really that in the absence of civil liberties, there can be no notion of trade union rights. The Human Rights Committee and the Committee on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights. So here we have a covenant that, of course, has been ratified and is critically important and takes up ILO Convention, freedom of association. Straightforward, very clearly, including the right to strike. These two bodies have also emphasized the really synergetic nature of their instruments and the ILO Convention on Freedom of Association. So if we come to the Sustainable Development Goals, and these, the entire world has signed on to them. The entire world has signed on to them, and they're not just the labor ministries that have signed on to them. They are all of the representatives of governments around the world. And they set out important goals that are also relevant to labor rights and freedom of association. And first, I will refer to SDG 16, which recalls that it is essential to promote peaceful and inclusive societies for sustainable development. So here, this is something we have all committed ourselves to, peaceful and inclusive societies. It is something that we are perhaps not 7 years from attaining. Access to justice, which has been highlighted also by the additional secretary, independent justice. Again, these are all critical to assuring the rule of law, effective, accountable, and inclusive institutions. And our collaboration here is that the ILO shares the information that we have on the torture killings, disappearances, attacks on the civil liberties of trade unions and of employers' organizations. So not to forget that freedom of association, as Kamala pointed out, it's for workers, it's also for employers, and their rights are also in many instances being restricted in their basic civil liberties. And another important ILO Sustainable Development goal for which we are the custodian agency is SDG 8. Now, SDG 8 on employment and decent work for all has an indicator which looks at the respect for freedom of association. And this indicator is based on ILO sources. And so it is very important that information is brought to the ILO supervisory machinery for the determination of the degree of respect for these rights. The ILO has a web page. It is now up, where you can see for each country around the world the extent to which freedom of association is being respected, and whether there is progress in the respect or whether there is regression. So you can see this over time, over years. India fares not too badly, so I think that this is a good thing. There are and India is there. India is there, even though it hasn't ratified Convention 87 and Convention 98. But of course, there is information from the ILO supervisory bodies, both through the Committee on Freedom of Association and also through the annual reports that India needs to make when it has when its commitment under the 1998 declaration. So India will say where there are challenges, and also the social partners, the trade unionists and the employers' organizations can also raise issues in this respect. Freedom of association is fundamental to the meaningful and inclusive participation in and access to decision-making. It's critical to rebuilding trust, supporting a just transition and social cohesion, and forging a new social contract in times of transformational change. It means a shift in how we perceive our stakeholders, from passive actors to rights holders and duty bearers, recognizing the rightful place as active agents in development processes. And this is necessary for all women, persons with disabilities, migrant workers, minorities, those in the informal economy, domestic workers, rural workers, gig economy. So it really is ensuring that they can be active players in their own lives. The ILO has therefore embarked upon the goal of having a new social contract. That new social contract is essential to the foundation of a human rights economy, which has been called for by the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights. Finally, I just want to say a word about the increasing threat and the view of the world focused on safety and security. This needs to be balanced with effectively preventing conflict and crisis, which can only be done through dialogue and participation. And this was what was the vision of the ILO constituents back in 2017 when it adopted the Recommendation on Employment and Decent Work for Peace and Resilience. It emphasizes the importance of respect for human rights and the rule of law for the prevention of conflict, not for only the response to conflict. It's highlighted the importance of collaboration and cooperation by member states through the United Nations system, international financial institutions, bilateral or multilateral arrangements. And here we do see elements of this coming into trade agreements, free trade agreements. the importance of showing really the respect for the basic fundamental rights. For our part, the ILO is committed to strengthening this collaboration within the UN system to ensure the concerted efforts for the respect of human rights, freedom of association, and the rule of law. We look forward to seeing how India is really the lead in moving forward on this in the Sustainable Development Goals, as we heard earlier this morning. And we look forward to working with you. So thank you.
Thank you, Karen. And I think you highlighted the importance of general atmosphere of democracy, as well as the point that the world is watching to see how India fares on the SDG goals. And I think it sort of echoes what the UN Resident Commissioner said this morning, that there is a huge expectation and we are expected to deliver, and that the ILO's SDG 8, as the custodian of SDG 8, we watch the freedom of association movement there too. It's my pleasure now to call on Mr. Mayank Dais, Assistant Secretary, Employers Association of Delhi, which is affiliated to the All India Organization of Employers, right? Yeah. Would you like to speak here?
Good morning, everybody. First of all, I'd like to thank the ILO for inviting me on this special day. It's the 75th anniversary of UDHR. It's the 70th anniversary of CFA. And personally, it's special for me because I'm getting to share space with my professor from law faculty. So at a personal level also, it's a wonderful to be here. I must give you some perspective as to what am I about to share with you today. I wear two hats. I'm first an assistant secretary of the Employers Organization Delhi, and I'm also a lawyer, an employment lawyer representing managements at various forums. Now, because ma'am is ma'am and she had given me just 10 minutes, and now I see that it's already 12, time for Amarjeet ma'am's session. But having said that, I've scribbled a few points that I'd like to certainly share with one and all, and more from the perspective of employers, young employers, MSMEs, and probably even young India. So at the outset, I would like to dispel this popular notion about Indian employers that they are indifferent to working conditions of workers or the cause of workers. Somebody who has been practicing in this field and advising employers on a day-to-day basis for the past decade, I can tell you very well, I can assure you that employers are very, very much concerned about the well-being of employees, almost as concerned as their bottom line in their businesses. So certainly this is not second to any other cause. Secondly, something very, very important and crucial is the fact that employers are very cognizant of the concept of workers' right equaling to human rights at the workplace. So this is a well-accepted proposition that unhappy workers is bad for business. An unhappy worker ending up on social media is even worse for business. So we are very, very cognizant that the employer should be in a good, happy working environment. And this is where the union really plays a critical role. They are the designated point of contact for the management. And while for a significant part of Indian industrial relations history, there have been serious conflicts between employers and unions, however, going forward, one can envisage employers and unions working together in partnership for mutual benefit of both business and workers. And this is where I'd really like to draw everybody's attention to a key development when it comes to the Industrial Relations Code 2020. And it's very important to underline the very significant departure in the terminology that has also taken place, which we earlier or even now have the Industrial Disputes Act of 1947. Going forward, the government, the employers, and certainly the unions have realized that we need to be working in a healthy, cohesive environment. And hence the focus is now on industrial relations. And now, in the industrial relations code, one long-standing lacuna that has always persisted with regard to the trade unions, which has been the lack of recognition, has also been addressed. This is helpful not only for the unions, but also for the employers. Having this one sole negotiating union or a council of negotiating union, again, makes it very easy for the employers that these are the people that we have to discuss our issues with and take it forward, rather than like the current situation where we have several unions, a fractured mandate, making it difficult for all employers across the board. So having said that, while a few years ago we would have a situation where employers and managements were fearful of unionization, we are very, very hopeful and optimistic that going forward, there is a greater fillip for us having unions, for us having a single point of contact with whom we can negotiate, bargain, and hopefully work towards a better future, both for employers and employees. I'll pause here, ma'am, and if there is any further discussion that takes place, I'll come in there. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mike, for making your point so crisply. And, we welcome the fact that you flagged this issue, that with the IR code coming in and with recognition getting sorted, the earlier maybe unfounded fear of unionization has also vanished. So we very much hope that that will be the case. And I took your point about your speaking further should questions address that. Can I now invite Mr. Sudarshan Rao Sarde, who is a member of the All India Secretariat, All India United Trade Union Center. Sorry, you're from HMS. You're from, my apologies. I read out from the earlier draft. My apologies. Yes. I'm sorry. You are from, of course, the HMS and Hind Mazdoor Sabha. Mr. Sarde. Yeah, please.
Esteemed chairperson, distinguished fellow panelists, and a very enlightened audience. My first request to the chairperson is, as trade union leaders, we are habituated to speak for long hours. So please, whatever is the designated time for me, a minute before you just make a caution so that I'll wind up within the time.
Certainly. Thank you for giving me permission.
Yeah, yes. As chairperson, you have the permission. Dr. Baba Saheb Ambedkar, the chief architect of the Indian Constitution, has said that cooperative federalism should be the guiding force for survival of the Constitution and establishment of rule of law. But very unfortunately, what we see is a competitive federalism now. States are fighting, competing between each other like, they are different countries, foreign countries, in inviting investments. And in the process, they are diluting labor conditions. They are going for labor flexibility. And the net result is that we are racing towards the bottom. This is the reality. As a trade unionist, I speak the ground reality. And whatever is right, we feel, we speak on any dais. So it is for the audience to decide whether you need the ground realities to be known to you. More than 100 years of labor movement. Previous predecessor speakers have said 1918, Mr. Modi formed the Madras Labor Union. So at that time, forming a trade union is nothing less than sedition and a treason against the state. In those conditions, trade unions were formed. And 100 years of sacrifices, struggles, sweat, blood and toil, the trade union movement has created 44 labor laws. And very unfortunately, one stroke of a legislation in the parliament, no debate, no discussion, by voice vote, they have changed it to 4 codes. And 54 crores, 540 million of the population are working people in this country. Out of the 136 or 140 crore people, 1 billion people, for 38 to 40% of the population is the working population. And you change their laws without consulting them. And still you call it the largest democracy of the world? We have our own reservations. I'll be the devil's advocate for the moment. So therefore, what we are witnessing is not a participatory democracy. What we are witnessing is a representative democracy. There are elections for every 5 years, absolutely. The elections are on time. There are free and fair elections, no doubt about it. But is there a participation of the people in this democracy? No. Workers don't have a right to speak. One simple, I don't want to go into the details. One clause, one aspect of these 4 labor codes is Industrial Disputes Act, especially Chapter 5B, envisages that workers were 100 in number. For any closure of the factory, they have to take permission from the government of India, appropriate government. By one stroke of a legislation, you have made it to 300. 99% of the MSMEs in this country, they lost their right to represent. 99%. They can be hired and fired without any notice. There are about 6 crores, 66 lakh, 33,000 MSMEs. Figures may be varying because some of the companies are closed due to the pandemic. So, 6.5 crore MSMEs, there, by single stroke of this legislation, 99% of the workforce are out of the purview of the Industrial Disputes Act. What empowerment is the government doing? You're not doing any empowerment. You are taking away what is there in the Constitution. So therefore, it is very important that whenever we talk about democracy, it should not be a representative democracy. Some excess is happening every 5 years. It should be a participatory democracy. When you build participatory democracy, then it is duty bound by the state that there should be consultation. There should be discussion. It's very unfortunate. Indian Labour Conference earlier, it used to be addressed by the Honorable Prime Minister of the country. Now nobody comes to the ILC. ILC is now being held. In many of the states, minimum wages are not yet. I come from Hyderabad, Telangana state. Minimum wages are given recommendation that is not being implemented for the last 3 years. So this is the ground reality. Tripartism, bipartisan, social dialogue, they are completely absent now. They are absent in this country. The governments, the employers, and the media, they speak the same language. Several times, we feel as workers and trade unions, are we part of this country? Are we consulted on any of the issues? We are not consulted. And if you talk like this, we are anti-national. This is the situation in the country now. So that inclusivity is missing. And one of the changes that brought in the 4 labor codes is occupational health and safety. Just look at any of the newspapers. You see a number of accidents that are taking place. Alarming accident, industrial accident. Alarming. Whether it is Delhi, Hyderabad, Gurgaon, anywhere you see in the country. Alarming increase in the spate of industrial accidents, and many people die. And whenever there is death, the chief minister or the prime minister or the local minister, they say that we are announcing a compensation of 5 lakhs or 10 lakhs or 15 lakhs. I want to submit to the enlightened audience here. No amount of compensation can bring back the life. Nobody can buy any life. If people are lost on the shop floor, then it's a big tragedy for the whole family. No amount of money can compensate that. So even that is also deregulated. And after 1991, the focus from a welfare state has been shifted to a social model which is neoliberal in nature. Completely so far, the regulatory authorities of the Labor Department have been completely watered down. The Joint Commission of Labor, the Deputy Commissioner of Labor, they have no right to go and inspect any of the industrial establishments. Earlier it was there. The warning systematically has been removed. Now it is a free for all for the employers and the governments. Workers have been completely excluded from this. And still the government, the society feels that there is so much of peace in the industrial arena. I'm saying.
So the next 1 minute.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm saying, you said that there is so much of silence. I want to submit. Silence is not peace. Silence is only a temporary phenomena in societal activity. There can be a storm after the calm. So therefore, our submission is that if you want genuine freedom of association, right to collective bargaining, then workers must be called at every level, right from a small unit to a very big, large corporation. One last example, 41 factories, ordnance factories have been privatized. 41, employing about 90,000 workers. So, with one stroke, you have made an act in the parliament, and anybody who talks against the management in any of the ordnance 41 ordnance factories or their outsourced companies, then you will be put in jail and you will not get a bail. You can't even apply for bail for 6 months. See, UAPA has been extended to industrial. So, with a heavy heart, I have to say that this is the situation. Finally, I end my speech with a small quotation. There's a fantastic ghazal by Jagjit Singh. If you have time, you please listen to it. Aapko dekhkar. There's a ghazal. Aapko dekhte dekhta reh gaya. Kya kahun? Kehne ke liye kya reh gaya? Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Translation is, when I saw you, I'm seeing you, I'm just looking at you, because there is nothing for me to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. You raised such important points about the need for democracy to be further nuanced as participatory democracy. The question of what happens when there's privatization. In fact, one of the pending complaints before the Committee on Freedom of Association is dealing with the extension of the Essential Services Ordinance to the ordnance factories, which is determinative of this, and we'll wait to see. Without opening up to questions and answers, I'd like to invite at least 2 ILO constituents, the social partners who are here, if they'd like to put forward their views for just 2 minutes. If you're speaking in the next session, then I'd request you to reserve it at that time, Mr. Chandrasekhar. But if anybody who is not speaking in the next session, but who's an ILO social partner who'd like to speak, can you just raise your hands? Yes, please. So, but I'm going to request you for 2 minutes. Yeah.
One observation.
Thank you.
I want to make. So, good morning, all on the live.
Just introduce yourself.
I am Chandrasekhar.
Yes, I know, but
I represent the Indian National Trade Union Congress. Okay, my Leonard from my organization, I do appreciate his eagerness to development. We fully appreciate you, but what is the reality which Sudarshan Rao was really aspiring? It is quite shocking, because when we are in democracy, that should have participated equally, and that is what of democracy. Because by virtue of the majority in the parliament, the government decides not to consult anybody, or to have dialogue with any trade union movement, and stop the occurs in the system of consultation and tripartite system, which is entirely stopped and saying that the country is under fastest growing economy and all that. This is absurd. It's absurd. And majority of the workers are not happy with that. That is, I want to make it very clear. And the employers organization in the ILO and the CFA responsible personalities has to see the developments in India, and it is totally discarded the tripartite system in India. It is quite unfortunate. We want to register this protest before the ILO and UN agencies. Thank you so much.
Thank you. One more person. Yes, please. Do you have a mic? Can you, sir, can you just introduce your name and organization?
Anil Kumar Tyagi, All India United Trade Union Center, Central Trade Union, AIUTUC. Why the government not called on the meeting, ILC meeting, Indian Labour Conference, the tripartite forum? Actually, we want to express our opinions, idea, problems. So this question is, we have to promote this because it is a tripartite forum, so we have to raise it. Secondary, just employer sides had come on the recognition of the union, where there is only one union, registered union. It is seen that employers, they don't call the unions. Instead of that, they form internal labor committee. I am not against the labor committee for so many purposes, but mainly trade unions are they are not called on. They don't want to discuss with the trade unions. Actually, trade union is a corporate body. It has its own seal and stamps and responsible to the law of the land, responsible to the government. So it should be where there is a single union, it should be treated as a recognized. In both these questions I have raising, our government, our constitution permit us a laborers one side and the employers other side, and government is neutral. Government is neutral there. So we have to say, we have to express our, and this should be translated into action by the government.
Thank you.
Thank
you. So can are you yes, just in half a minute?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
Just your name, organization, because that will be the last.
Myself, Vidyasagar Giri, National Vice President, AITUC.
AITUC.
Just I wanted to raise 2 points. One, it is program for observing 75 years of International Human Rights Day. It should be reviewed that what we have achieved in 75 years.
Okay.
But we are listening a speech of UN representative, government representative, and even they have no time to listen us. What is real situation? It should be noted.
Okay.
Secondly, employer representative told that IR code have eliminated a lacuna of right to recognition of trade union. It is also misleading. Definitely, it was not act, but code of discipline by tripartite consultation. It's existing up till now.
Thank you, but I think
It should be noted out, and the right of recognition is not actually the right of recognition. That is elimination of trade union, because 15% is essential for recognition.
yes.
Then everything, even the government representative told that we have ratified child labor convention. After regularization of child labor, they have ratified the convention. So this is how much that this function should be real evaluation of 75 years, achievement of 75 years, not for comparing the fact. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your very important views that this should also be a review. I'm not going to ask Mayank to respond to this because this is really beyond my remit as chair of this session. But we wanted to hear, because there was a slot, any other social partners. The rest of the conversation, I think, over lunch. But it's my very pleasant duty as the person chairing this session to thank Mr. Vule, to thank the other three speakers present here today. My apologies for misclassifying you, sir, and also the three observations that came from the chair. And thank you very much to the ILO for allowing us this. Thank you.
Before the panelists move away from the dais, may I request my colleague Vaishali to kindly come over and just a token of appreciation and a photo. Give it to you.
Oh, I have
So the chair has thanked everyone, but I take this opportunity and it's my honor and privilege to thank the chair for bringing together so many perspectives and a rich discussion. Of course, the time is limited, but the points were pertinent and the way it was raised, it's a food for thought for us to put all these discussions in our way forward. So thank you so very much, Dr. Shankar. So as we move to the second panel, and we are certainly running very late, I really thank you for your patience. We can hear the simmering noise of the burners there. So the food is also getting ready, but we have to wait because we have a very important session, which is on promoting human rights, empowering people through freedom of association. And to take this panel discussion forward, I would like to request Ms. Amarjeet Kaur, General Secretary, All India Trade Union Congress, if you can join us here, ma'am. And the speakers for this session are Mr. R.D. Chandrasekhar, Vice President, Indian National Trade Union Congress. Then we have Mr. Arvind Singh, National Coordinator, National Association of Street Vendors of India, NASVI. We have Ms. Aditi Yagnik, Organizing Coordinator, Self-Employed Women's Association. And we have my colleague here, Ms. Oksana Wolfson, Coordinator, Freedom of Association, Lipsin, ILO Headquarters. I would like to hand over the rein of this session to the facilitator for this session, Ms. Amarjeet Kaur. Thank you.
I thank ILO for giving this opportunity to me to take this session through. We are already half an hour late, so we have to do the time management. And that's why 4 speakers will be there, so we can have 10 minutes each, and then little bit for question answers. The day is very important. We are sitting here, and it is being told since morning, labor rights are human rights. Yes, labor rights are human rights, but I want to go beyond that also. Rather, I would say that the discourse of human rights in human civilization was begun by the labor movement itself. It is in the 19th century when the workers started asserting and telling, we are not animals, we are humans. Don't take too much work from us, 12 hours, 14 hours, 16 hours, treat us as humans. So this discourse of laborers asking and making a cry that we are humans, and then they said, there are 24 hours, and we assert 8 hours for work, 8 hours for rest, 8 hours for our family. And it's not only workers who were telling, medical fraternity also told that for 7-8 hours you can do work. Beyond that, it's taxing on your mind and body. So this discourse began from 19th century, carried forward in 20th century, and ILO Convention number 1 itself was on 8 hours of working day. I want to assert on this because we are talking that labor rights are human rights. So human rights are labor rights also, vice versa. And there is attack on this 8 hours working day. So attack on human rights is happening. It is happening on labor rights. Second point which I want to bring to the notice is, in India, when there was nobody knowing the name union, there were no unions. World Union was not known to workers, and we were being ruled by Britishers. At that particular time, the first strike which is registered in Indian labor history is in 1827. We are in 2023. So it's 195 years ago that the workers went for strike. There was no union. It was not a union call. Workers were raising hue and cry that they should get justice. But that right to strike slowly and slowly, ultimately, with several dozens, hundreds of strikes which were held in India, we got that right to strike. And that right to strike is part of our process of unionization, freedom of association, freedom of speech, etc. But that right to strike is also under threat. One of my colleagues spoke here. So when we talk of human rights and labor rights, there are several things to ponder on today. That how our friend who was speaking online, he himself said, he also said, when wealth is produced, huge, but inequalities are rising. And if informalization rises, informal workers are worst affected as far as labor rights are concerned. What is happening in India? Informalization of formal sector is happening. Fixed term employment has been brought. Job security is not there. In such a situation, job security, wherever it is waning now. Because even in the formal sector, it is 50 to 70, 50 to 80% of the workforce, which is not regular. It is only outsourced or contract. Last point which I want to make, and then I would ask the colleagues who are on the dais, panelists, they will speak. In between, if there will be need, I'll make any comment. And that is that there is lots of debate on labor codes, for and against. But if you ask trade unions, there is no for and against. We all are opposed because we were never consulted. So freedom of association or the human rights, immediate thing comes to is there should be social dialogue. There should be consultation. You should be able to sit on the table, put forth your viewpoints, and then to whatever maximum you can push your viewpoint, but then when collective agreement reaches, then you try to adjust with that. But that is fundamental for freedom of association, for trade union rights, and for human rights. But that fundamental issue is under question in our country. And that is why the trade unions say we were not consulted. And today it is almost now, last ILC was held in 2015. So more than 8 years, no ILC has happened. It happened in July 2015. So without Indian Labour Conference, without listening to labor and the trade unions representing labor, all the things are being pushed through. So naturally, we have our viewpoint, employers have their viewpoint, somewhere we agree, many places we disagree, this all happens. And that's why we think that labor rights are under attack. And if everybody is saying democracy is part of labor rights, part of human rights, so basic concept is of democracy, then if labor rights are essential, then democracy is essential. If democracy has to be there, then there has to be dialogue, mutual consultations, which is becoming absent. So if we are India taking a pride that we have ratified so many conventions, then we have also ratified convention number 144. And open violation is happening. And we trade unions have gone to ILO. We have made the complaints that under 144 convention is being violated in India. Even on the question of right to strike, recently there was a meeting internationally by ILO workers group also. Our right to strike is under threat. EDSO was brought, which was converted into EDSA. So the basics and fundamentals which are very, very necessary for the labor to move on and their trade unions to represent for their rights, that's where if the fundamental issues are absent, then the human rights, the labor rights are under threat. That is how I'll say that the democratic rights of the workers and the test of a democracy to exist is that the unionization, the rights of the trade unions should be ensured. But we find the rights of the unions, rights of the freedom of association, even though 87 not ratified, but those rights were there in Indian Constitution, which we could practice. But there is attack even on Indian Constitution given rights. That's what is happening. So from that point of view, we are in a way, I don't want to play a card of victimhood, but it is true that we are victims as unions. That's how I look at it. And definitely it's very difficult to unionize and organize. One of the sentence which was used, and it is there in the concept note. Everyone has a right to association, but it is also written, you cannot force anybody to join any union. It's written there in the concept note. So if it is written there, you cannot say who will be there for negotiations and who will not be there. so-and-so union will remain recognized and all the rest of the workers represented through other union, you will not be representing because code on IR is telling this will be the set pattern of negotiations. So it goes against the fundamental principle of freedom of association, what we are discussing about today. So those difficulties are there. Our young friend, energetic friend, Mayank has spoken here. There is a lot we can dialogue, discuss amongst each other also, and try to come to some understanding. Because additional labor secretary, he is not here. He spoke. We do not agree many of the things which he said here. Of course, certain things he told the truth of our constitution and the rights available here. But when it comes to practice and how it is happening, and he boasting about that we have brought about labor codes and it's going to do wonders, we disagree on that. And we say it on in front of their table also when we go to the labor ministry, because labor ministry itself, if you go there, they themselves are violating labor laws. There you find all contract and outsourced labor under the nose of labor ministry. So we tell it on their face. It's not that I'm saying here. All my trade union colleagues very frankly tell on their face also. So with this, I will stop here and I will go by the schedule which has been given to me. So, 4 speakers are there, and I'm requesting Comrade R.D. Chandrasekhar from INTAC. He is going to speak on perspectives from cotton supply chains. Please. It's up to you. You want to speak from here or from there? Okay.
As it is a panel, I will be speaking from here. Good morning, everyone. I am Chandrasekhar, representing the Indian National Trade Union Congress from the Andhra Pradesh and Telangana branch. I am the General Secretary of the Union. And I am very much honored to speak on this Universal Declaration on Human Rights and Freedom of Individuals 75-year celebration. And I am very much thankful to ILO specifically for giving me this opportunity. On behalf of the Telangana State Branch of ILTC, we have been doing a project with the ILO for the cotton field workers. And we have been working with the rural workers and agriculture workers specifically in the state of Andhra Pradesh and Telangana state, and where I am the General Secretary of that union since 2011. And we have been organizing, and ours is the largest union with a huge membership of women participation. And since 2019, we had a agreement with the ILO for doing a project for the cotton field workers and small farmers together. And there we had a joint action committee consisting of all the central trade unions, AITC, HMS, CITU, and the local trade unions like TRS, KV, and Telugu Nadu also were with a part of our committee. And we started organizing the connecting training programs for the cotton field workers, where it was completely exploited. Means a lot of people working in the fields, the agriculture workers, like everyone was speaking about our human rights and trade union rights. And even the Article 19.1 also says about the freedom of association. Not only about the Convention 87 and 98, even the Article 91 also speaks about the freedom of association. Even then, we are not aware. Being of not getting educated or not getting the opportunity to get educated. So there was a huge problem for us. And since we have been able to go into the rural parts, we have been able to organize a lot of training programs, awareness programs. And through those awareness programs, we were able to get a real picture of the issues of the agricultural workers working in the cotton fields and the small farmers, what they are facing. So we had an assessment, we have done a research on it, all together, all the central trade union centers. We sat together and we have analyzed and assessed that how to go forward. And on that basis, we have done some awareness programs for the specifically for the women empowerment. And we have done many programs on social media also, usage of social media. And it was more helpful for us I have a contact with our union members and the members working in the fields at the time of pandemic. And more importantly, I can say that this project was able to achieve the goals of SDG, like goal 1, which talks about no poverty, goal 2 about zero, what called it zero hunger, and goal 5 of gender equality, and goal 8 of not about recent work, I can say the economic growth. Because people working in cotton fields, we cannot say it as a decent work. But the economic growth was there. Because the people who were working in the fields, when we started this project, they are getting around 200 rupees. And the statutory minimum wage also was giving around 203 rupees. And when we started organizing them, we got to have an association with them. And we organized a union in 21, which is called Telangana State Small Farmers and Cotton Field Workers and Migrant Workers Union. And initially we started the membership with on the same level with 7,000 membership. And this year in 23, we are going to have 53,000 membership. And more importantly, when we started this project, the minimum statutory was giving our minimum wage was 203 rupees, but we were getting less than the minimum wages of 200 rupees with a equality. Women were getting 150 rupees and men were getting 200 rupees. But through our project's awareness about the equal work for the there is no discrimination about gender equality and all, we spoke about it. We were able to enhance that equal work for all the men and women together, because women were also working a lot. And more importantly, in this project, when we started in 2019, the school dropouts were 85% at the time of plucking of cotton. Because we were able to create a lot of awareness about the pesticides, about the side effects, what the children will be having. And when we spoke about these issues, when we spoke about these issues with our members, they have come together and they have told that they are not going to send their children to the cotton fields. And more importantly, in 23 this year, we have achieved a school absenteeism coming down to 21%. It has come because of the unionization. It has come because of the freedom of association. And more importantly, like people are defining the tripartitism which is happening, like Convention 144 is not happening here. That is true. But in this project of cotton fields, when we were organizing the informal worker, we had a real tripartitism because the small farmers, the farmers were participating, and even the government officials, the rural development, the labor department, the panchayat raj department were participating with us together. Means I have been in this trade union movement from the last 27 years. Very little time and very small time, only other than the organized industries, we don't find tripartitism. The employees don't come, even the government also doesn't come. It happens. But from the last 3 years, we were able to see the tripartitism happening in the cotton fields. Specifically, when it is unorganized or informal, people are ready to participate as a tripartitism. So one of the things what I have been able to say it as a success story for us. And more importantly, as I was saying that we were getting the people were getting less than the minimum wages. And now this year, because of the unionization, because of the collective bargaining, our people are getting 450 rupees per day. Means it is the economic growth, the SDG goal, what we are talking about has been achieved among our cotton field workers. And that is true. And the next year, for 24, we have an agenda of asking for a demand of 600 rupees per day. Because the cotton fields are making huge profits. And because of unionization, even the farmers and small farmers, they are happy because their productivity increased, their absenteeism has been increased. Means the dialogue which they used to have, like at the time of peak cotton plucking time, there used to be a huge demand of workers. So they used to have a fight with the farmers and the workers used to have a lot of fight. At this point, that has come down. Means when the union is there, those people are having a good social dialogue, having the understanding of how to give their productivity. And that has come. And our Telangana field workers are being able to do it. And more importantly, this project has given us more than 3,000 women leaders, where the rural workers, specifically the cotton field workers, are mostly 80% of women working over there. And in our union, we made a bylaw stating that the union president or the general secretary or the treasurer of the committee of village committee and the Gram Panchayat committee or Mandal committees will add a woman. Means it will be compulsory that one of the three top office bearers will be a woman. And that has given a good result for us. And those people are organizing in a very good way that IITC is getting strengthened. Not only IITC, the other central trade unions have also been strengthened. And more importantly, the recent assembly elections, which are held in the Telangana state, has given a result where our women workers and agriculture workers and cotton field workers have given a good mandate for a progressive government. And more importantly, participating as elite people, they are come forward as leaders. Mandal committees or full committee leaders. Means that was a achievement what our this project has got, because the enhancement of skills, enhancement of the leadership development, the women has got the awareness about it, that what are the rights which they are having, because they have been living from the last 20 years or 40 years, but no one told to them, no one reached to them about their rights. But all because of the INTC and the other central trade unions, we were able to bring that awareness. And that was one of the biggest achievements as a patriotic union. We were able to get the economic growth for small farm, the field workers, the agriculture workers, even the migrant workers. And that is the biggest result what we have achieved through. And when we started with the 7,000 membership 3 years back, now it has come around 51,000. And that is also one of the biggest achieving point for our IITC union with a huge membership, paid membership. And that is what is my achievement through this project of fundamental principles and rights at work for the cotton field workers. And I pause here. If you have any questions, you can ask me. Please, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ardi. Yes, his presentation tells how unions can ensure human rights. And
Yes.
from 200 you go to 450.
450.
And 450 you could bring their wages. Women leaders could come up, and you are asking for not only 450, it should go up to 600 you are talking about. And all these achievements through unionization, and good thing is that they have been doing that project along with ILO. Through that project you could carry forward. Our experience has been that projects done along with ILO in certain informal economy workers have always helped, not only creating awareness, increasing unionization, but also several achievements for those workers. This has happened, it has come out well in your presentation, and awareness is key. And large plantation workers means women are very large number. If they can be brought up into leadership, wonders can be done. So that's part of, if there will be question in the end, we will see if there will be any questions. Now, I only want to say that it was being told that India is good, that our rural workers have done the ratification of convention, and rural workers can also form their unions. But you do not know that agriculture workers have been left out in Social Security Code. 15-16% of the total of informal economy worker is left out of the Social Security. What will their unionization do if they are out of Social Security? This is also a fact. So now I will ask Arvind, National Coordinator, National Association of Street Vendors of India. They had more than decades of struggle of hawkers and vendors, and had some achievements of law. Let us understand if those achievements are percolating down to the workers or not. Yes, please, Arvind.
Thank you, ma'am. This year we completed 25 years of our existence. So we were debating whether we should celebrate it or just observe it or just say that we have completed 25 years. So a good platform to think on these lines. So we began by when India had started liberalization and they had stopped issuing licenses all over the country. And so we thought we should bring them together on a platform, and we started organizing them, district-wise, developing leaders among them. And our mission was to get a national policy for street vendors, which we got in 2004. Now, as the policy, that time I personally realized how difficult it is to live in a federal country, so you get a national policy and then it has to go down to the states. From states, it has to go down to the municipal bodies. But we did struggle, and around 13 states implemented the policy. Some states had very good examples. So then we realized, and Narega came at that time, so we realized that better than the policy, if there would be a law that would help us in implementation. And we were winning small battles also along that way. Like there was mafiagiri in 13 states in India, where the municipal tax from the street vendors was auctioned, and there were typical mafias who used to take that contract for collection of taxes, and they were like feudal lords of those markets, and they would collect how much, whatever their muscle power would allow. So we got those to be stopped. There were a couple of suicides by the street vendors. One infamous was in Lucknow, when this leader, after 40 days of sitting on hunger on his strike, and the commissioner was not listening against this mafia tax. And then he went to the commissioner's office, and just in front of him, he poured petrol and lit himself. So such incidents did happen, and then this mafiagiri stopped for good. So presently, if I say most 90%, 99% of municipal corporations do not give on contract, and even if there is some collection, it is directly through the street vendors themselves. So then we thought that let's incorporate the good aspects of policy making and the policy implementation into a law. And we struggled, and we were able to get the law in 2014. So the law says briefly that until the street vendor has been surveyed, he or she cannot be evicted. So the onus of removal now comes on the municipal corporation for the onus of survey. Second thing is that no system of application, but any municipal corporation willing to give the licenses, the certificate of vending that was called in the law. So certificate of vending has to do a survey of street vendors, so you don't have to ask for application or any other method, but a survey. And this was based on many experiences, which I would not go into the details. The third thing was that because I went to ILO, the informal workers session in 2002, and don't take me wrong, but I felt lost at this tripartite system, because where does the street vendor go, So then we got into the idea of a town vending committee, So it can be a multi-partite system, and so in the law it says that there will be a multi-partite system, town vending committee in every city. And this will have 40% elected representatives, because in the policy we found the sycophants being nominated to the town vending committee. So elected representatives and 10% as the association members, and the town vending committee will be headed by the chief executive commissioner, the chief executive officer, the municipal commissioner, because in the policy we had the mayor, and mayor had no intention of getting the policy implemented. So we brought in the commissioner now. Then we had this provision that without recommendation of the town vending committee, no decision regarding street vendors can be implemented in the city. And then this provision of that if a person has certificate of vending, no police law will be applicable on the street vendor as far as street vending is concerned. So that was a very major development. So then the policy, again, federal, state, you have to get the every city, every state to formulate the rules and the schemes. and many states were making making rules which were against the street vendors. Here in Delhi, we have a very popular chief minister, very pro-poor, but when the rules came out, we had to protest against him and the rules had to be changed. So I felt that, the politicians have lack of understanding or lack of interest in getting into the details of how to ensure the rights of the people. That was one experience. And then, but if you look at from now, so in India, all the states have rules and schemes. 55 lakh street vendors have been given certificate of vending. In India, 75,000 we have been able to get in Delhi by the Municipal Corporation of Delhi. And then 4,600 town vending committees have been constituted in India. Now, if you attend, any of you, I request you to attend town vending committee meeting of your city. You will be thrilled, all the stakeholders, the police is there, the commissioner is there, and other stakeholders are there, and the street vendors can have one-to-one dialogue. And if the leader is a developed one, if they have organized themselves very well, those dialogues are very interesting. But gradually, the municipal commissioners have realized that it is like, their power being snatched. So they have stopped attending the town vending committees. They sent some lower level official, and also, the town vending committee meetings are not held regularly. So we got the standing committee, Government of India, to recommend that, every 3 months there has to be a town vending committee. But there have also been cases where municipal bodies have declared no vending zone without going to the town vending committee, and the street vendor organization, it happened recently in Simla, and the street vendor organizations went to the High Court, and the High Court said, no way, you can't have a decision regarding street vendors without getting the recommendation of the town vending committee. So that is the power of the law, and that's why we were trying to get the law. But the question is how many times a street vendor organizations or where a street vendor organizations can go to the court. So based on our policy experiences, we got a provision made that there has to be a grievance redressal committee headed by a judicial officer in every city. And the street vendors having any grievance will go to that committee. This was based on an experience of a court order in Delhi where there was committee and the street vendors could go to the committee and get the grievance redress. But unfortunately, Government of India says that 11 states have constituted the committees, but wherever you will meet members of the committee, the municipal corporations do not have any intention of getting these committees effective. So then came the COVID, and we were pressurizing Government of India to give some money to the street vendors. But they suggested a scheme, they suggested a credit program, and I embraced it fully, because I have a feeling that until the street vendors get out of money lenders, their problems will not be solved, because I have seen huge amount, once in debt, always in debt, and the money lenders are like local patrons, local lords, and they make the life of the vendors hellish. And today, the Government of India figure says 65 lakhs street vendors have been linked with the credit program. Large number of our members have been linked with the credit program, and because of the credit program, there has been integration with the municipal corporations. So, if we look from the macro perspective, a lot of things are fine. But if we go down at the ground, so for example, MCD, we pushed the municipal corporation very hard and we were able to get 75,000 certificates. Now they go and they started throwing, like in G20 summit happened recently, they started removing vendors, they started throwing vendors. And then we had to go to the High Court and get orders from the High Court to enable the vendor to sit there. And we don't go for PILs because the courts now fear ordering for PIL. They fear that cities will become chaotic. So we go for individual vendors. Now, how do you get pro bono lawyers for so many individual vendors? Fortunately, we have been managing. But in other states, the high courts are also not very proactive. So that is a major problem. The second major problem definitely is people are not organized. If they are organized, if they have got vending zone, they feel that they should not agitate, they should not be together, they should carry on. They are also business people, the street vendors. They carry on their business people. So if somebody from Jodhpur calls me, that the situation is becoming bad, I ask them, when did you protest last time? Tell me, when did you protest last time? And they don't have answer, So as an organization of people, of workers, that energy should not go. That's my fear also, that even if vending zones are created, I just escaped to meet the CEO of FSSAI, and he was saying that 100 street food hubs have been created in the country. But I said, we need, every city need food hubs, because we work with the street food vendors. So every city needs many food hubs. So the beauty of street vendors is that no large retail chain can take away the customers. That is their beauty. The strength of our organizing should be like Modi ji is giving guarantee. We should also give guarantee. No street vendor can be not allowed to vend. Thank you.
Very interesting presentation, Arvind. Long journey of 25 years organizing street vendors. According to the law, it's still only in 13 states. Or it is now everywhere. Okay. In the beginning, it was a problem. But one thing which you have brought out vividly, that it appears good from top, but when you go to the grassroots, the experiences are different and difficulties are there. So that's where. And second point which you are bringing in the end was, until and unless union always remain awake, organized, pushing, fighting, also having some legal luminaries on their side, the things don't move. And especially in the informal economy, that is there. Of course, a very good presentation. If anybody would like to ask question or make remarks, they can do it later on. But this is also true, as you are saying, that these town vending committees, they should meet regularly. You think they meet regularly? No, they are not. Yeah. So forming is a difficult thing. Organizing agitations is difficult. Then continuously remaining alert is important. Whatever you achieve, if you are not doing पहरेदारी नहीं करेंगे तो वो सारा फिर से रिसीड करने लगता है, रिटार्ड होने लगता है. That is the experience from their side also. Now I would request our senior sister Aditi Yagnik. She is organizing coordinator of Self-Employed Women's Association. So she will make her presentation.
Thank you. And I would like to first begin by saying that whatever we have heard since morning about freedom of association and right to collectivize and bargain is, and right to collectivize and do collective bargaining is a very basic right. It's a basic right in the Constitution of India. It has been adopted as one of the core labor standards at the ILO. And given the social and the political fabric we are in right now, internationally and nationally, as Amarjeet ma'am had said about the labor codes, it's more than important to sort of look back and reassess where have we reached in all of these years. Have we moved forward? Are we going backwards? Are we stagnant at a place about workers' rights, labor's rights? And on the passage and workers' rights are as important as human rights is something that we've been hearing since morning. But organizing workers and trying to get them into a collective, into a union has been a difficult task, especially for women workers in the informal economy. I'd like a minute to go back to what our government representative in the morning had said, that how there are only 80 to 85% of informal workers in the country. There are actually more than 92% of informal workers in the country who fall through most legislations and the recently introduced labor codes. So given this platform where we are trying to celebrate the passage of Universal Declaration of Human Rights, we should also be cautious and aware of the people who we are talking for. I would like to now go forward by saying that forming associations and coming together has been one of the most basic things as it highlights the aspirations and concerns of workers, and SEWA's experience in organizing women informal workers has been nothing short of that. So the voices of women workers who've remained invisible, who've remained unrepresented and undercounted, has been able to get a voice through this organizing campaign that has been going on for the last 50 years. A very important thing by organizing that we have been able to sort of get through is that how women workers' voice and their aspirations have reached various stakeholders and policy makers through the freedom of this freedom of association and by forming member-based organizations and collectives. Along with that, one thing that is very interesting is that through the formation of these member-based organizations, the member-based organizations are able to speak. The members of the member-based organizations can speak for themselves. They do not need anybody else to come and speak for them. So the coming together of members and member-based organizations and forming collectives emphasizes on the need that how there is a requirement for the workers to come forward and state their demands by themselves. A very important thing that Ms. Curtis also highlighted in the morning, and even Amarjeet ma'am said about the entire process of collectivization and right to form associations being a democratic process. And in SEWA, through the formation of various executive committees and through the formation of various boards, we've been able to maintain representation of our women workers in these executive committees and boards across the 18 states we are now working in, so that there is representation and aspirations and rights and voices of these workers that are actually presented by themselves. And in my very tiny experience of organizing women workers, I think that organizing and freedom to association can be seen as an alternative educational space, especially for women workers, because the kind of lack of representation that our women workers have can be actually, the bridge can be met and the bridge can be made if unionizing and collectivizing as an activity keeps happening and women get to know of their rights and the entitlements that they have as workers and also as women. As SEWA has been organizing women workers in the informal economy, one of the biggest barriers, I think, has been to sort of move over the conceptual blocks of what a worker is, who the employer is, because interestingly, when we look at women workers in the informal economy, there is multiplicity of work and there is multiplicity of trades. So if a woman is working as a farmer, as an agricultural worker in peak agriculture season, she will go back and be a BD worker or a chindi worker at home. And during the non-agricultural season, she will be a domestic worker. So, and even Ila-Ben in her book, We Are Poor But So Many, highlights a very similar thing where she says that there is a need to get over these conceptual blocks and this fixation that we have with sort of defining workers and defining the blocks and the categories in which workers are working, because women workers fall through this web of terminology. Women informal workers especially fall through this web of terminology, and they do not belong to any well-defined category. If SEWA looks back at her history and the entire struggle for being registered as a trade union, it was very interesting to see that the registrar of trade unions back then was not willing to register Seva as a trade union, because they said that home-based workers, chindi workers, BD workers are actually not workers. So if they're not workers, how do we register this as a trade union or as a workers organization or as a workers collective? So this entire concept of so I think if one asks about the basic and the most major roadblock in organizing informal women workers, is this entire struggle of trying to trying to put them in a box of a worker and having a defined employer. Seva's support in organizing women workers has been straddling between the cooperative movement and the trade union movement. So through the trade union movement, workers are organized and they come together on the issues that are around their trade, the issues that are around their work. And through the cooperative movement and which is by forming trade cooperatives, there is an effort that the workers take ownership of their work and own the work and the labor that they put into. Both union and cooperatives give great collective bargaining power, access to credit and capital, and ultimately it forms into building assets. Seva organizes women on social, economic, and political rights, and there is no doubt that all three, social, economic, and political fabric of the country have changed and sort of have worn and torn. But work is a great leveler. The need for roti, kapda, or makan remains across the spectrum, and workers have been coming together to raise the same. Thank you.
Thank you, Aditi. Self-employed women, they are cooperative as well as unions, both together. And also you were talking about multi-work they do. So today you are doing this, tomorrow you are doing that, the multi-workers. So this is the reality these days in the society. Salahuddin has also come. He wasn't well. I was told he may not be taking floor, but he has come. He can take 5 minutes. Come on, speak. You don't want to? Okay. He is not keeping well, so he was saying that. Now I request Oksana, take the floor. She is coordinator, Freedom of Association, Lipseed, ILO.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm grateful and delighted, but also very humbled to be here in exchange with you, especially my fellow panelists, on such an important topic as freedom of association. Freedom of association is a foundational principle of the ILO. But while the first 10 conventions adopted by the ILO concerned very important topics such as hours of work, unemployment, maternity protection, night work of women and youngsters, etc., no instrument relating to freedom of association was adopted before 1921. Convention 11 on the right to association in agriculture took the position that agricultural workers should be accorded the same rights of association and combination as industrial workers. And as we've heard today, India has ratified Convention 11 in 1923. The freedom of association and protection of the right to organize convention, Convention 87, was adopted 27 years later in 1948. It provided all workers and employers, without distinction whatsoever, the right to establish and join organization of their own choosing. It also granted such organization the rights that enable them to function in order to further and defend the rights and interests of their members. In 1949, next year, the conference adopted the Right to Organize and Collective Bargaining Convention, Convention 98, which we've heard about today. This convention was viewed as a complementary to Convention 87, in that it was based on a principle that had already been accepted, namely that workers and employers, in exercising their right to freedom of association, must be able to form organizations that are independent and are able to represent their members, their interests for the purpose of collective bargaining. Beyond this, however, Convention 98 contains no language meant to further clarify the scope of the term freedom of association. But the term freedom of association was nothing more, is of course an abstract principle. And here comes the CFA, the Committee on Freedom of Association. Over the past 70 years, through its decision in close to 3,500 cases, the CFA shaped a comprehensive and substantive understanding of the meaning of freedom of association based on actual situations. And precisely because the Committee on Freedom of Association conclusions are based on actual situations, it has always been and remains at the forefront of the debate as to what freedom of association means in the current economy, new circumstances, new challenges, as the world of work develops and evolves. Some things, however, do not change. The paradigm of the labor relations remain the same. Workers are typically in a weaker position vis-à-vis employers. To balance this power, on the one hand, the legislation often establishes minimum conditions that employers and workers cannot fall below. On the other, there is a recognition of the right to join together in trade unions in order to achieve collectively working conditions that workers individually would hardly achieve. But who are these workers whose right to organize should be protected according to ILO supervisory bodies? Can they be workers in the informal economy? Can they be domestic workers? Should self-employed benefit from the right to organize a bargain collectively? Do ILO instruments in general and Convention 87, Convention 98 in particular cover these categories of workers? The answer to this question is clear. The level of rights must be the same for both formal and informal workers. There cannot be a lower level of rights for informal workers. The same is true to all other categories of workers we discussed in detail today. It is very fact of work that should attract protection, and not whether the work is of an informal or formal nature. This is reflected in the approach of the Committee on Freedom of Association. In its decision, the committee has made it clear that the right to freedom of association does not accrue on the basis of the existence of an employment relationship alone, but that it extends to all workers, including self-employed workers, domestic workers, home-based workers. I would also like to say that the challenges, of course, remain, especially regarding the latter categories of workers that we discussed. But I would also like to add and briefly mention another category of workers that we did not talk about, but it was briefly mentioned today earlier. International migrant workers constitute today 5% of the global labor force, which makes them an integral part of the world economy. Labor migration provides significant benefits to both origin and the destination countries. The International Organization of Employers has pointed to reliable evidence that regular migration contributes to economic growth in destination countries and makes a positive, net contribution to the economies and society in which migrant workers live and work. It is imperative to recognize freedom of association and collective bargaining to migrant workers in order to realize the pledge made by all UN member states committed to the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development that no one should be left behind. Even in the absence of explicit restrictions on non-national and a lack of explicit freedom of association and collective bargaining rights protection in law for non-national may have a negative impact on migrant workers forming their own trade unions. In countries where the legislation is silent or is not sufficiently clear, the ILO supervisory bodies have called on the government to amend their legislation and to provide information on how this right is exercised in practice. There are several examples where the governments took action. I'll mention two. In Turkey, the Trade Union and Collective Agreement Act of 2012 eliminated the citizenship requirement for trade unions founders and provided possibility for non-Turkish citizens to establish trade unions. In Algeria, just last year in 2022, the nationality requirement was removed, and legislation now allows non-national employers and workers to form organizations. However, with regard to migrant workers, there's another layer of difficulty which concerns their status of migrant workers. While migrant workers, regardless of their status, are covered by Convention 87, some countries make a distinction between documented and undocumented migrant workers. And in this respect, I would like to refer to two cases examined by the Committee on Freedom Association. The first, in 2001, the Committee on Freedom Association requested the government of Spain to reflect the terms of Convention 87 in its legislation, which restricted the foreigners' trade union rights by making the exercise dependent on the authorization of their presence and residency in Spain. The Committee of Experts later noted with satisfaction that the legislation was adopted and now provided that foreign nationals have the right to organize freely or join an occupational organization under the same conditions as Spanish workers. I would also like to mention a later case examined by the CFA, which concerned the refusal of the government of Republic of Korea to register a migrant trade union. The CFA determined that migrant workers were in fact denied the right to organize in practice and urged the government to take a number of steps in order to fully ensure and safeguard the fundamental rights of workers to freedom of association and collective bargaining of all migrant workers, regardless of their situation, regular or irregular. In June 2015, the Supreme Court of the Republic of Korea ruled that a foreign worker who does not have the status of sojourn may organize or join trade unions. Of course, the Committee on Freedom Association welcomed this judgment and noted with satisfaction the government's indication that the union of the migrant trade unions was issued a certificate of registration just 2 months after the decision of the Supreme Court. Demonstrating its commitment to freedom of association and collective bargaining, the Republic of Korea ratified Convention 87 and 98. And these conventions are now enforced for these countries. To conclude, while the question today is not so much whether all these categories of workers have the right to collective organization and bargaining, but the real question is, and as we heard from the panelists today, is how it should be organized. because the challenges are significant. They range from legislative to social and cultural to political and economic. In addition to developing a robust legislative framework ensuring freedom of association for all workers, the existing trade unions also play a role in strengthening the voice of most vulnerable workers, and we also heard about it today. Numerous studies have revealed that the closer the relationship between the existing social partners and migrant workers, for example, workers engaged in informal economy, domestic workers, the more effective their voice can be in protecting their rights. Trade unions have demonstrated that they can enhance the protection of these categories of workers. They can participate in legislative reform processes and policy developments. They can organize these categories of workers. They can provide support services to these categories of workers. They can facilitate grievance handling, and of course, negotiate and conclude collective agreements, which would represent interest of these workers. Taking action to support the collective voices of workers and employers, in other words, to fully recognize freedom of association and collective bargaining rights, will help us to reach the broader goal of eliminating inequalities and ensuring decent work for all. I thank you.
Thank you. Oksana, you told about many successes achieved slowly on this question of freedom of association. But I also want to repeat what Clement was telling in the morning. They were saying that these rights are not being respected and protected. This is the trend today. It's the growing trend. So that is also there. As much we achieve, and the efforts are to push us back. So unions are the only guarantee that the workers can raise their voice. Also, I want to bring to the notice of the House, forming unions itself is being made difficult in India with the labor codes. The conditions which are being posed and the powers being handed over to registrars to de-recognize unions, every day 1 or 2 cases are coming up. When unions established 10 years, 15 years, 30 years, 50 years ago, they are being de-recognized. So this is a challenge before us when we are talking of freedom of association. You dwelt on migrant workers and the issues taken up. We are in a dilemma. We had an Interstate Migrant Act in India. The governments did not follow it. And during COVID, we saw how pathetic was the condition of our migrant workers. For decades, this law was there. For decades, respective governments did not implement it from demand state or supply state, how the workers should be taken care of. So we saw the tragedy on the roads. But instead of having a policy, national policy on migrant workers and strengthening our Interstate Migrant Act, what has been done is that act has been amalgamated into Occupational Safety and Health Code, OSH. The code on safety which is coming, this act has been brought there, and 26 of its articles are reduced to only 6 within this. So 20 are removed. So it's that's what I'm saying. It's sort of a reversal happening, which will not be good. And so it has been dumped into occupational safety health. So in this situation, naturally, exclusive process is happening. It's not inclusive. As the additional secretary told in the morning, that what we are going to do in the coming days is to make it more inclusive. He mentioned it, and he said that the unions will be taken care of. Now, we had a law that only 7 members, if they come up and they form the union, a union can be registered. And all those laws are being changed. And instead of making it more inclusive, when freedom of association say even one individual will have a right to talk and freedom of speech. And here is a situation that the law itself is being made difficult for unions to unionize, means workers to unionize and unions to remain continuously. So now I think we should open for discussion. We began half an hour late. Accordingly, as the session was for 1 hour and 15 minutes, we do have about 10-15 minutes with us. If there are any comments or questions from the house, we should definitely respect it and take it. 2, 3 we can take. Yes, please.
First of all, I hope I'm audible to everyone. First of all, thank you. And your heavy words being passed to this generation as well. It's been a very insightful morning for us also. So the heavy words are being passed to my generation are like cooperative federalism, social dialogue, and collective bargaining. And I got to know that even one individual has a right to speak or right to represent their own tribe. So with all the dignitaries that I have got the insight from the people who have spoken about, they have raised the ways, Mr. R.D. Chandrasekhar, I think, from 200 to 400 and this is 10 to 600. And then the self-employment for the women itself, they've been talked about. But I like to ask, where are the workers with disabilities? Where are the poor workers with disabilities? And I got to know that we have a right to form an association, but it would not be possible if people are not there. So this is just an observation, nothing like with a hard feeling or not at all a complaint. It's just I myself living with cerebral palsy, so it's being a little difficult with you do not see your representative over there. So it's just that. And all the SDGs that you talk about includes us also. Like SDG 1, 3, all talk about the person with disabilities. Maybe that now I'm started my journey three months back with an advocacy. So I know that it's been difficult, but some changes are being done. But the first and foremost, it's being done by offering a chair or offering a table to someone. So, and I thought that if I not speak today, so it will be injustice to my profession also, injustice to me also, and injustice to the observation that which we are celebrating, 75 years of UDHR. So thank you, and take a thought. And if people are not being visible, if people are not being included in the panel, we have a same problem encountering that I still have to use a staircase, not a lift today, because people are not there, so that the mindset has not been changed. And some things I know that I'm taking a lot of time, that change has been done. For example, this plastic bottle has been replaced by the glass bottle. This has been observed that this we have reached, but this glass bottle may not be accessible for my friends with disabilities also. So this far, and little bit of attention is required. Other than I know that advocacy brings a lot of challenges, and this generation also witnessed the work that you have done. And I have a total respect of that where we have reached somewhere, but with poor workers with disabilities, a lot of work needs to be done. So please take this thought that we represent matters like everyone.
Yes.
Like nobody should left behind.
Yes. So freedom of association means free speech. You had every right to speak, and you spoke. Of course, visibility of workers is a big issue. And without that visibility, without they being identified, they having cards, many of the facilities which are announced and that is on paper, they are not able to take. That question is there, of course. So youngsters have to come forward. Definitely, even in unions, they should take more and more interest. Next person. Yes, please. Yeah, give her mic. She wants.
Thank you so much for an exceedingly insightful panel. I also agree with the fact that 75 years on, perhaps there's a lot to celebrate, but also perhaps a lot to, I don't know, mull over and think through what still needs to be achieved, right? So I used to work with an organization which I just left, which launched an investigation into COP28 and worker abuses at COP28, many of whom were low-wage migrants. One of my observations from this was a specific hue of corporate capture of this space, because the chair of COP28 was Sultan Jaber, who is the CEO of ADNOC, right, which is a massive oil company. Now, I suppose my larger question to the people on the panel, in whatever way you're looking to comment on this from your individual perspectives, would be useful, because I'm not someone who thinks that, you know, all companies are bad or something along those lines, or something so trite. But at the same time, I think that the trend that a lot of the world has gone towards, which actually obfuscates this, I mean, any rights perspective, right? Like, so for example, how can you talk about climate and have the chair of COP28, basically the biggest climate rights, discussion that happens? How can you have that being the head of this company making oil deals on the side? And at the same time, what happened over the past couple of days was the UAE actually released this list of prisoners of conscience that it is going to continue to detain, which and this happened during the COP conference. So this is just one minor, not minor, massive example, but this is happening in various shades around the world. So obviously this is pertinent here as well in various respects. So I suppose my very lengthy, so apologies for that, very lengthy question to the panel is, from each of your individual perspectives, whoever is open to answering this question, how do you begin to combat something like this from a union perspective using the principles of freedom of association?
So any of the panelists will reply. If one last.
A very interesting question is raised from the audience. I also work on climate issues. There are structural limitations to the solutions on the climate issues. As long as there is profit and greed, finding solutions on climate issues is very difficult. And throughout the globe, we are seeing that the democratic space is shrinking and authoritarian governments are coming into power. I think it's a larger question. I have a lot of faith and hope on the younger generation, because climate change is an intergenerational issue. We have lived our lives, we have whatever we could do, we have done, but I think, you know, we are there to support you, but the flag has to be carried by you. Thank you.
So, friends, we'll have to wind up because the concluding session is also to happen. So, any of the panelists wants to say anything, you please let me know.
I just wanted to respond to her invisibility question. So like when we began our work, the street vendors were everywhere. They were in every city, small city, metros, but they were never in records of the municipal corporations. So that was a big challenge. And today, almost all street vendors are in the records of the municipal corporation. Most cities have done the survey. One is that. Second, they were not bothered about where are the street vendors, who are the street vendors. Now the municipal corporations are conducting elections to the town vending committee. Just imagine their headache, the people whom they frowned upon, today they are enumerating them, they are making voter card, and they are conducting elections to the town vending committee. And just imagine the commissioner who thought he or she was the king and queen of the city.
today is forced to attend the meeting of the town vending committee. Many of the municipal commissioners, particularly those who are direct IAS officers, they didn't even bother to sit in their municipal body meetings, but today we are forcing them to sit in the town vending committee meetings, and discussing with the street vendors the issues of the city. So these are like big steps, Now to think that for an unorganized, uneducated people who have not been used to this kind of organizing or used to this kind of negotiations, now to think that that it will be transferred, we ideally want, that it should be transferred. And also, in unorganized sector, most of the leaders are the workers themselves. That's a big difference as compared to the organized sector, So they are also vendor, and they're also taking out time to help the people. So the leadership, we need to understand that leadership also. So there is a context, and the most important context is the municipal governance, the kind of governance we have in the country, particularly at the district level, at the municipal level, how much they can deliver despite all of your might, despite the media advocacy, despite all your might. They are also at that level, their delivery mechanism is also very bad.
Thank you, Arvind. Friends, as far as this climate change and Sudarshan ji tried to tell it, workers are most worried as far as climate and environment is concerned. It is projected as if workers or the trade unions are not serious about climate issue. They are the worst victims when pollution happens. They are the first victims. Then only after that the other people in the vicinity get affected. So this has been a serious issue with the trade unions as far as it is concerned. And recently what you saw in Uttarakhand, 41 of our workers were there stranded for so many days. Was it not known to them that those hills are very fragile? Were the companies who were working for that tunnel ever took note of this and had sufficient precautions? Did they follow the international Austria protocol which is there for making tunnels? No. So what Sudarshan was saying that greed and profit is the basis. So to start a tunnel in a hill area, you are supposed to have simultaneously insert pipes into it because accidents can happen. So as soon as if any blockade happens, the workers can immediately come out of those pipes. But how many days those workers suffer? And actually, rat mining, which was going on in India, which has been made illegal, it is actually those boys, rat miners in the last leg, they brought out our workers. And the big machines couldn't do. And the company's name, which violated all the laws, nobody is talking about it. So climate is a serious issue for everybody, and especially for workers, it is a serious issue. It becomes an occupational safety hazard for the workers. So environment, climate, all those are important issues for the trade unions also to carry it forward. So the session was very interesting. Panelists were very good, and something came from floor also, especially from youngsters. Two of them came out with the question. I only want to just add in what Sasaki was saying in the morning. Satoshi Sasaki in his presentation said that peace and social justice, they become victim in conflict and, you see, in a situation of insecurity. And he was trying to make out a point. And today we are faced with conflicts going on in the world in different parts. Who are the victims? Our workers are losing jobs. Every day, the people who are losing their livelihood. And worst part is that no respect to human rights. Somebody made one mistake, need to be told the world over and isolated, one can understand. But you cannot punish the whole population. I'm meaning to say these conflict situations are most insecure for workers, for common population, and now today we are finding women and children are the worst sufferers in Palestine. So human rights, when we are talking about observing the day, everybody has a human right. With mistake of somebody, you cannot punish the whole of populations and especially children and women. That is happening. I wanted to bring that, and I wanted to pay homage to all those who are becoming victim of this kind of massacres which are happening. So I use this opportunity to pay my homage to all of them. I also say that human rights means there should be peace and harmony in the society, in the world, within the countries, within the communities, everywhere. Peace and harmony is required if we really want to protect human rights. If human rights violation in any part of the world, then that will enter our homes also. So it cannot remain isolated in one part and other parts will not be affected. It will happen. And that's why we, the workers, are finding, be it conflict in Russia and Ukraine, or be what is going on in Gaza, everywhere we find how the working people are suffering, how the livelihoods are going, how the shelter from the rooftop is going away. Basic minimum needs which are supposed to be there are being denied. All that is happening. So on this Human Rights Day, we stand with all those who are becoming victims of greed, profit, and wrong politics of trying to somebody catch the ear and you are trying to teach the lessons. So that all is wrong. I thank all the panelists for very good inputs you have brought, and I thank all of you. You are so peacefully since morning. You are there, and I think with that peace, the concluding session also we should pay attention to. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. There couldn't have been a better closing of the session. And thank you very much for all the perspectives which have come in this session. Yes, it's a fact that the topic is so vast. We can't do justice to it in just 1 hour or 2 hours. It needs months and years of debate. But having said that, in the spirit of the day which we are observing, I think the attempt to bring all under one roof and think through together is something which we are slowly achieving, and let's hope we're in the right direction. On that note, I would like to request for some more patience from your side before we get into the closing session, a token of appreciation for our panelists, and then we quickly go into the closing session and then to lunch. Thank you. And also a picture with the panel. Thank you. Thank you. Let's hold it. Let's. This is major. Thank you. Now for the closing session, I would like to request Ms. Karen Curtis, the Chief Freedom of Association, International Labour Standards Department, ILO Geneva, to please come over here for the closing remarks, please.
Thank you so much.
It's okay. So it's a signal of something which is unsaid.
Thank you so much. As I know that I stand in between you and in between you and lunch, I really want to be rather quick. But I just wanted to give some key highlights, not being able to capture obviously everything, but also some thoughts about future steps. So first, I think that we all start from the very beginning, which is that human rights are labor rights. and vice versa, labor rights or human rights, and the critical role of workers in bringing about the world's awareness to both human rights and labor rights. But we know and we have heard about the growing global trend of regression on these rights. Civic space is shrinking, authoritarian governments are coming to power, and not to mention military coups. And obviously, none of this is an environment in which freedom of association, labor rights, and human rights can be respected. We've heard of specific challenges to these rights, the lowering of labor conditions and lack of consultation. Let me be clear, the only flexibility that the ILO articulates is one based on meaningful and participative collective bargaining. That is where you can find the solutions that respond to both sides of the question. We've heard about the importance of and the challenges to ensuring these fundamental foundational rights for all workers, and the importance of the outreach to the over 90%, 92% I heard, of informal economy workers. This is not only out of care for rights, but also in a recognition that freedom of association is the foundation for the human rights economy and sustainable economic growth. It's the basis for the formalization of informal work and not the opposite. There was thus a strong call for the mobilization of informal economy workers and the role of the government in providing the necessary enabling environment for this. That means addressing the various challenges, legislative, practical, cultural, societal, and more. I spoke about Convention 141. Convention 141 represents an important commitment of the government to ensuring the collective voice of agricultural and rural workers. If this is not perceived as being done, the convention is an avenue to bring that information forward at the international level, but also to engage with the government to remind them of their commitment and the steps that they need to take. We've heard about the importance of freedom of association for the participative decision-making, for the development of responses for the just transition in the green economy, and ensuring representation of all voices, and only those that represent those voices, including persons with disabilities. And thank you so much for speaking up. That is what freedom of association it is about. It's about being able to speak for yourself, but in a collective way, because only then do you rebalance the imbalance of power. We've heard about the relevance of freedom of association to all SDGs, the reduction of poverty, equality, promotion of decent work, economic growth, inclusive and participative institutions. I spoke of SDG 8.8.2 indicator as a tool to promote progress on freedom of association and collective bargaining, because it is a quantitative indicator, and quantitative indicators wake up minds. We speak in lofty words, but nobody really listens. But if you say, oh, you're not doing very well and progress is not so good, we can show it here, that wakes up minds. So use it. But it is based on ILO sources, which means that the information needs to come to the ILO if there are challenges on the ground. There are so many issues. Our excellent facilitator mentioned that we need more than a morning, days, weeks, months, but perhaps it's the start. The situation of freedom of association and collective bargaining may be well known in India, and you've all been speaking to it today. But the commitments to the ILO machinery and the SDGs provide an opportunity to present a clear picture so that we can see progress within the global community. The development of legally binding regulations on due diligence, and here, of course, I talk also to the employers. In many countries, that legally binding obligation is an impact on global value changes. It provides another avenue for really making progress on the situation on the ground. In this last session, we heard of successful examples of organizing women workers, workers in the cotton sector, street vendors, and thank you, because that's extraordinarily inspiring even with the challenges that you face. They serve as good case studies to promote for further sectors. We look forward to further initiatives and joint efforts where all play their part, promoting freedom of association as the foundational human rights at all levels in India, national, state, and municipal. The role of each group, trade unions in the broad sense of the term, so that means for all of these challenged sectors we've heard about, employers, organizations, and government in mutual respect, to work together for the respect of human rights and freedom of association. This was recognized here by the participants. I hope that this event can further the engagement on doing this together. Social dialogue is necessary for building trust and finding common solutions that work for all. And our last note, perhaps a relaunching of the Indian Labor Conference could be an excellent step to show respect and assurance of the participative voice of all in the labor market, and could highlight, if you do it next year, the importance of the ILO Collective Bargaining Convention, which will be in its 75th anniversary. So with that final note, just let me thank you all for allowing the ILO to participate in this with you, and we will surely accompany you as you move forward. Thank you. And bon appetit.
Thank you, Karen. And absolutely final note. It's my proud privilege to propose a vote of thanks. We have a room full of very experienced leaders, a lot of knowledge, information, insight, innovation in the room. We have CSOs, we have organizations of people living with disabilities, people living with HIV, LGBTQI representation is also here in the room. We have workers' organizations represented, we have employers' organizations represented, and government, of course, government representation is also there in the room. So we have a tripartite plus a room full of commitment, and there couldn't have been a better way to observe this day together with you. We also learned during the discussions that in order for human rights and democracy and freedom of association to thrive, to protect it, to preserve it, it's important that tough questions get asked and also tougher solutions get implemented. And for that, everyone has to come together. It's no single person's business. And everyone's expertise is needed, whether it's employers' voice, authority, power, innovation, or it's workers' demand, dissent, or support to make the powers that be walk the talk. So on that note, I would like to invite you all for lunch. Thank you all very much from the bottom of our heart. From ILO side, one person who's sitting very quietly here, Ms. Elena Zerasimova. She's the labor standards specialist. Together with Elena and my team here in the room, Vaishali, Namita, Vaibhav, Ruchira, Namita, Yogendra, we all, sorry? Karun, yes, sorry. There are all other colleagues who are around us. And Neha, yeah. So basically, I'm missing out on names and I'll be pulled up for that later when I go back to the office. But in short, all the ILO staff here, we are thankful that you could come here and make this event together with you. Thank you so much. Lunch is waiting and let's enjoy lunch. Thank you.